Hey, John Wellborn. Oh my gosh, there's Jack Humphreville.
Hey, can you guys hear me?
Yep. Whoever that is, whoever that is.
There's Jan Terry.
And there's Lewis and Olivia. Look at Olivia. Hello, Olivia. You look lovely.
I love your irises, Jan. They look gorgeous. Thank you.
Thank you. I better tone it down.
That's her public official ambiance that you're seeing. Ex-public official.
Okay, here we go. Yeah, that's better.
So I see a couple of our panelists are here. I'm going to see if I can do a couple of things at once. I'm going to see how many folks we can actually spotlight. That's two of them. Maybe I should spotlight myself, huh? What do you think?
Go ahead, give it a shot.
All right.
Break the camera, John.
Do I have my camera on? Yeah, I do. Oh, that John.
I see Miss Laura. We got to spotlight her. Hey, Laura.
All right.
Hey, can you hear me?
Yes, ma'am. We can hear you fine.
Right on. I'm using a different system, so.
And last but not least, we're going to spotlight our buddy, Miss Jan Reichman from Comstock Hills. Hey, Jan.
Hi there.
How are
Hey,
you?
Jan.
Hi, y'all.
All right. So listen, it's 5:59. We always believe in starting promptly and not punishing punctual. So now that the clock has struck 6, let me officially open the meeting and say welcome to everybody. It's a pleasure to have everybody on a nice Thursday evening in sunny Southern California. I want to thank our neighbor Jan Reichman and our other neighbors from Comstock Hills Homeowners Association. I'm John Heath. I'm the president of United Homeowners Association. We represent the unincorporated communities of Windsor Hills, View Park, and View Heights. Jan Reichman is the president of Comstock Hills HOA, as I mentioned, and Comstock Hills is also a nonprofit volunteer organization that represents the area just west of Century City, right, Jan?
Actually, north of Century City.
North of Century City, got it. And because it's our custom, I always like to respect our elders when we're doing something. So Jan, if you give me a nod or a wave and give me your assent to proceed with the meeting, I appreciate that. We have your permission.
Not if you call me an elder.
Oh, okay. Well, I retract that statement then.
Go.
All right. Thank you, ma'am. So listen, I am going to just kind of introduce this as best I can. Obviously, we've got a fantastic panel. I want to let everybody know that our friend, the Honorable John Chung, is going to join us at 6:30. He had a prior commitment, but we are pleased to have the Honorable Jan Perry, Jack Humphreville, and Laura Velke. I'll get into their backgrounds in a minute, but let me just say that, give you a little background on why we're here and what was the stimulus for us as a nonprofit homeowners association doing a panel on politics and what do we need to do to fix our politics and make sure our government agencies are actually working to solve our problems. Some of you, in fact, most of you probably know about the ongoing attempt by Senator Scott Wiener, Tony Atkins, and others in Sacramento to pass legislation that would essentially force increased housing density into single family communities, ostensibly to somehow create more affordable housing. I'm still not quite sure how that's supposed to work. I guess that's some Reagan-esque trickle-down economic theory that they're banking on there. But anyway, those are two folks, Atkins and Wiener, with heavy ties to the real estate industry. We tend to think that that may have a little bit more to do with the constant push for increased density in single family communities, given the fact that so many single family properties are owned by institutional real estate and other big time real estate players that also happen to be political contributors. So there's that. You know, we obviously recognize the importance of affordable housing and the urgent need for it. We just think that there are right ways and wrong ways to go about it. And clearly SB 9 and SB 10, which are part of the continuum that started with SB 50 last year and SB 1120, are not the way to do that. And there's absolutely nothing wrong with single family communities. View Park, Windsor Hills, and View Heights happens to be one of the last remaining predominantly African-American single-family communities in Los Angeles, along with our neighbors in Leimert Park, Baldwin Hills, Ladera Heights, Hyde Park, etc. And I'm speaking for all my neighbors here, but I have a feeling that we all would have something to say if someone started trying to force more density right in the middle of our communities. But we'll talk more about that in a minute. And then there's also, speaking of politics, a race going on right now for the 54th Assembly District, which, as everybody knows, or most people probably know, stretches from South LA through Culver City, Ladera Heights, part of West LA and Westwood. Is a pretty big district, pretty much the heart of Los Angeles, very diverse district. And I happened to be watching television a few weeks ago and saw a commercial where our county supervisor, Holly Mitchell, was comparing one of the candidates to one of our heroes, Jackie Robinson. And I couldn't figure out just how that was supposed to be an incentive for us to vote for somebody, because obviously, being compared to Jackie Robinson is not something that one would take lightly, and certainly not just because the candidate happens to be from the same university that Jackie Robinson went to. So I was a little puzzled by that. Then I started to look at the money that was behind that commercial, and I saw a bunch of independent expenditure committees from a lot of organized labor groups. And the LA Times just weighed in on this on behalf of this candidate. So I started wondering to myself, wow, at some point, some people may actually wonder if there's any point to them casting a vote, right? Because if this person is being so anointed, that obviously creates some issues for democracy. So anyway, those are some of the things that piqued our concern and conversation about our political process, and really talking with some folks that really know this process from the bottom up about where we went wrong and what we need to do to fix this. Obviously, we know we've got homelessness and affordable housing as major crises in Los Angeles. It's time for all of us as Angelenos to really come together across political, ethnic, geographic lines and figure out how we can close ranks. We all love this city. We need to demand better. Judge Carter, the federal district judge that issued the order, is now calling out a bunch of public officials and saying, you guys have not done what you need to do. So now I'm forcing you to do it. And then, of course, we're spending all this time and energy going back and forth with the folks from the so-called progressive group on things like forced density and campaign finance and so forth. And then we've got right-wing nuts that are out here trying to pass laws across the country restricting everybody's right to vote. And those are the folks that we really need to be focusing on and dealing with. And all I can say is when Liz Cheney becomes the voice of reason in Congress, you got real problems. So with that introduction, let me take a minute and introduce our panel, and then I'll let them speak in the order that I introduced them. First, the Honorable Jan Perry is the former 9th District LA City Council member, known for tackling tough issues and creating jobs and affordable housing for her constituents. During 3 terms in the City Council, Jan brought in $15 billion in investment, $52 million in net new tax revenue for the city, and approximately 90,000 full-time jobs. Jack Humphreville, my favorite gadfly, has been following LA City finances for over a decade. He has watched the city's finances deteriorate despite record revenues because the city has continued to enter into budget-busting labor agreements with the same public sector unions that finance political campaigns. This conflict of interest, according to Jack, leads to unbalanced budgets, less public service, lack of funding for infrastructure, and massive pension liabilities. So that's our friend, Mr. Jack Humphreville. And Laura Velke is a consummate political campaign expert. She's what I like to call the operative. Laura served as the former state director of volunteers for Obama in 2008, one of my favorite campaigns. And she has over 30 years of business management experience. Laura currently runs her own consulting company focused on supporting nonprofits. I'm going to ask Jan Perry to start us off. And if everybody can stay on mute We are going to repost the agenda, and we will set aside maximum time toward the end of this for audience Q&A. Ms. Perry, the floor is yours for 5 minutes. Go ahead.
Thank you, sir, and make sure that I don't run over.
Gotcha.
Thank you, appreciate that. I'm very happy to be able to speak with all of you tonight. I know we've had some very intense discussions about issues that I have observed over the years. I was in office for 12 years, a veteran of 5 campaigns, won 3, lost 2, ran for mayor, ran for supervisor, lost those last 2 races. But what I have learned and increased my knowledge is on the issues of independent expenditures. Those are campaigns that don't have any monetary limits, but cannot coordinate with the candidate. Among political people, you know, there's always the chatter before somebody files for a race that they figured out who's going to do their independent expenditure. And then once the race is filed, the papers are filed, they stop talking to each other. I observed those in the mayor's race in 2012, in the supervisor's race, with some added dimension to it. Now, I've always run locally at the city or at the county, but because of the onset of term limits, you've got more and more people coming out of Sacramento and coming to the county and city. In Sacramento, they can open committees, park money there, and then transfer that money into campaigns, at least at the county level, not at the city level yet. But you see that musical chairs going on. And I'm looking forward to talking about the differences between behested payments, independent expenditures, and the office holder account once a person is elected and is in office, and how that too can affect campaigns.
Jan, do you have any specific thoughts or suggestions for the group about what we might be able to do to counterbalance the impact of independent expenditures, or you want to wait and talk about that?
I think I want to wait to talk about it because I want to have everybody weigh in on it, but it's a dangerous thing because, you know, lawyers will argue that everybody has their First Amendment right to express themselves. And the only thing that legally that I've ever observed that could be done about an independent expenditure is to make sure that they disclose within, say, 48 hours when the money was dumped on behalf of a candidate. But, most people in the general public don't necessarily pay attention to that. And so I'm hoping that tonight we can raise awareness about how an independent expenditure brings money from outside your community, inside your community, more often than not elects a candidate who has to answer to those who funded the independent expenditure and whose interests, the outside interests, may not be aligned with the interests of the community. And that's a perfect example of how you end up electing people whose interests are not aligned with what you think your community's interests are. And, you scratch your head for 4 years going like, well, how did this person get elected? Well, it's because they got $3 million dumped into an independent expenditure campaign for them so that, they have TV commercials and things like that. And in this market in Los Angeles, if your opponents are on television and you're not, it makes it harder for regular folks who don't tap into special interest money.
Got it. Thank you. Jack Humphreville, you have obviously a particular interest in the overall impact of labor unions on our state and local government. And most of us recognize unions have weighed in, as Jan just got through saying, on local races, including the one that's currently going on, the AD 54 special election. Most of us support organized labor on principle. I started my career at DWP as a member of a local union, EAA. So how do we pull these organizations back from being the bull in the china shop when it comes to local politics, Jack? Let me see if I can unmute you. There we go. Go ahead, Jack.
Can you hear me now?
We got you. Go ahead.
First of all, I think we have to distinguish between 2 types of unions. One are, what I'll call private sector unions, where people sitting across the table are not, there's no conflicts of interest. It's let's say the UAW versus General Motors. On the other hand, you have the public sector unions where they're sitting across the table from politicians whose campaigns they finance, and as a result, it's not what I believe in arm's length negotiations. not very familiar with a lot of the, county and state issues. I am familiar with the city issues. And I'm going to sort of go through a little bit of a story about what happened to the city of Los Angeles. Back in 1989, the city, 1920, the city had a balanced budget, was looking forward to the next 4 years of having a surplus of a couple $100 million. They entered into a labor agreement with the cops and the firefighters in October. And all of a sudden, as opposed to having a balanced budget, we had a deficit of about 150 to 200 million. And over the next 4 years, the deficits were going to be $200 to $400 million a year for each of the 4 years. It was about $1.2 billion. So all of a sudden, you had these labor agreements just really turned into a river of red ink for the city. This is all sorts of stuff. You get into things what they call the structural deficit, where expenses are going to exceed the growth in revenues. You have what we call a service deficit as a result of the structural deficit, where the city in this case is just trying to save money. They make cuts and cuts and cuts, and as a result, your streets aren't getting fixed, or your sidewalks aren't getting fixed, or the service calls at 311 are delayed. So you have service cuts. And then the final thing is that leads to what I call intergenerational theft, where we're dumping billions of unfunded liabilities onto the next generation or next generations of Angelenos, whether it's unpaved streets or unfunded pension liabilities. So how do you go about fixing this thing? The budget advocates have come up. I was one of these budget advocates. We've come up with a variety of different solutions or ideas. One is that if the city is not able to enter into any contract, that will result in a deficit, period. So the thing that happened in 2019, where the economics of the city went in the toilet as a result of these contracts, they wouldn't be able to do that. I think also we've been interested in recommending, following up on the recommendation of the LA 2020 Commission, where they suggested that we form an Office of Transparency and Accountability to oversee the city's finances. Not that they have a say on it, but at least they can tell us what the hell is going on. And I think that would, be very helpful. So, we have, there's also another thing where we've also asked for open and transparent labor negotiations. Now, we're not allowed to be in the, in the room when the, the city council is negotiating with the labor unions. But what we can do is ask to be updated every time they come in and come out. And there was a thing they had down in Orange County called COIN, which is called the open conferences in negotiations. And basically it says that you have to, when you go into labor negotiation, you say what your goals are. When you have a meeting, you have to give what the bid and ask are. And when you finally arrive at an agreement, you have to have an independent third party that reviews it. And there's like a 30-day waiting period. In the city of Los Angeles, we find out about these deals when they come to the city council. There's no reviews. Paul Koretz one time just basically told me to stick it. Go look at the council file, and there's about 500 pages of labor agreements that were just posted prior to the meeting of the Budget and Finance Committee. So between concept of no deficits, the concept of Office of Transparency and Accountability, open negotiations, or we know what's going on, I think we can do a lot to eliminate some of these, the structural debt, some of the surprises that we have in the structural deficit. Simple as that. I'm done.
Thanks, Jack. We'll come back and talk a little bit more in depth about some of that very interesting budget issues. So Laura Velke is somebody who is organized and worked very closely with many of the folks that are in the so-called YIMBY or Yes in My Backyard movement. These are the folks that apparently think all housing is good housing and the denser the better. And that single family neighborhoods are bad. I'm still scratching my head trying to figure that one out. But anyway, what are your thoughts about what we need to do to balance some of these out of control policies about forced density coming from the left? And are you thinking that we should try to out organize or sit down and try to reason with folks? What are your thoughts on that and other related issues?
You know, thanks, John. It's funny, I wrote up a whole thing about the corruption of the city. And, you know, hit on a lot of the same points that Jack and Jan pointed out. I think it's a twofold thing. I think we talked about this a little bit personally. I think it's about, we have to rise up. We have to start caring. Democracy is not a sit back and watch process. It requires active participation. It requires an electorate that cares about what happens in our city and in our state and in our country, for that matter. Excuse me. I think that if we make enough noise and we organize correctly and efficiently, I think we can have a lot to say in shaping public policy. And I think, you know, it's funny, I actually was doing a little research and I pulled up one of Jack's articles, you know, talking about Jose Huizar and his 34 count indictment and how nothing has changed. And that's mirrored through every single article. Today, still nothing's changed. Literally nothing has changed. No accountability on any of these politicians, no changes in public policy. Ethics Commission is not working. You know, our neighborhood councils have been corrupted. They're either utterly incompetent, taken over by developers, or in the pockets of politicians. What was supposed to be about community organizing and uplifting our neighborhoods has turned into this astronomically heinous is the only word I can think of, behemoth of dysfunction and taxpayer waste. And I personally think that the NC system should be dissolved and that monies go back into the community via nonprofits and you apply just like everybody else does.
When you say NC, does everybody know that you're talking about neighborhood council?
Yeah.
Okay.
But I also think that in addition to rising up, I think we need to have a seat at the table. Everybody is having conversations with everybody else and nobody's talking to us. How did that happen? How did we lose the seat at our own table? How did we let happen other people making decisions for us? I think our politicians have forgotten who they are, who they work for, and who they represent. And I think we need to start hearing from candidates what they stand for. I think we need to Aaron Burr anybody who isn't coming out and telling us what they're about, right? I know who Kevin McCarthy is, right? There's no question who that guy is. I respect that. I don't respect him, but I respect that. At least I know who I'm dealing with. We want to know who we're dealing with. We want a candidate to come out and say, I am a pro-YIMBY candidate. Okay, we got you. We don't want you working for us though, because that's not who we are and that's not what we're about. The more I talk to people, and I think most of the people on this panel can attest to that, the more I'm out in the community and talking to people, this is up and down the state. This is the same conversation is happening up and down the state on the same issue, and we're all in the same position. And I think we're in a unique position today to make it stop and to change things in a meaningful way. But it's going to require us making a commitment, our communities making a commitment to push back and to say enough's enough. And it also means running candidates who may not want to run for office, but should run for office, as he shakes his head now. If not you, others, right? Other folks who have the same level of commitment as we do and are willing to stand in those spaces. And so those are my 2 cents for now.
Got it. Well, we'll thank you for that, Laura. We'll circle back and let some of your fellow panelists weigh in. I want to take a minute too and see, I think I saw our good friend, the county assessor for the county of Los Angeles, Jeff Pring. Jeff, are you in the house? You want to?
I am.
All right, welcome, sir. Neighbor, thanks for being here. Do you have any thoughts on this matter you want to share with your constituents that you're on?
I agree with the speakers. They are all very wise and insightful leaders in the community, and I wholeheartedly agree with the assessment they've presented thus far. I'm an elected official. I hope that I'm being held accountable and hope that I'm responsive to the needs of the community. And I think everybody in elective office needs to do the same.
Great. Thanks, Jeff. Appreciate you being here. Any other elected officials that I'm not seeing when I'm scanning the participant list? Or any potential candidates for public office? We'll open it up and let folks say hello if they so choose. Jan or Jack, do you have any follow-up to what Laura was sharing, or any additional points you want to make about any of this stuff? Jack?
I think Heidi Feldstein Soto is on there.
Oh, okay. Heidi is in the background. She doesn't. Heidi. Hi, Heidi.
Hello, I just turned on my video and I'm probably not camera ready, so I apologize.
That's all right. Miss Candidate for City Attorney, welcome.
Thank you. I appreciate all of you. And when you're saying that we ought to be running candidates who are here for the public service, I hope I'm fulfilling that role.
Outstanding.
So welcome to everybody, and thank you to Jan and Jack and Laura and to John for hosting this, because it's great. Thank you.
Great. Thanks for being here. Jack, you unmuted. Did you want to make a point?
Well, I guess my basic point is, coming from the investment banking world, finance world, is I always follow the money. And, you know, it basically tells you what's going on. I thought that David Zonheiser and Emily Albert had a very good article the other day about sort of the, inside deals of hiring people, which they dug that out of the Ray Chan business, but how everybody's sort of moving things around. There's sort of sort of subtle little bribes where you hire somebody's cousin, and that influences decisions. And I'm sure that's not a one-off. Whether it's patronage or whether people getting jobs, all sorts of goodies, it just sort of stinks. And we start to see a lot of this at the neighborhood council levels, where you have a lot of politics in there. You have people that are angling, and a lot of them are kiss asses, to the local council person, and you don't get anything done. And the council members, they go where where the most noise is coming from, or where the most political clout is. And I think, quite frankly, is they put the politicians put the interest of the labor unions, or as they call them, their partners in labor, ahead of the ordinary Angelinos, us ordinary Slavs out there who are paying the bills.
And is it you all's conclusion that that's primarily because the labor unions are such heavy donors to political campaigns at the local level? Is that pretty much the main?
Look, the guys at City Hall don't go to the bathroom without talking to the heads of the union. You just look at the way they make decisions, or the way, at these recent budget hearings, the coalition of city unions comes up, and it's, they can't wait to, bow over and scrape and tell them what great Americans they are. Meanwhile, they just ripped our eyeballs out in a contract that, resulted in, a multi-billion-dollar deficit. Other than that, I'm fine.
Right. And of course, many of these folks are our neighbors, family members, et cetera. And, the rank and file that pay the dues, that support what the union leaders are doing. I wonder if there's an opportunity for us to do, in addition to organizing and educating at the grassroots level among community members, I wonder if there's an opportunity to do some of that within labor. Jan, you were about to say something, I think.
Yeah, I was going to comment on redistricting, but I can let Jack finish his thought on that.
Yeah, I guess my final thought on that is, we always talk about the 1%. The 1% are all the fat cats, who are making gazillions worth of dollars and stuff like that. To me, the 1% are the 1% that work 1% that work for the city. Now, the city has 40,000 employees. Most of them, by the way, don't live in the city. And those are the guys who are the fat cats, where they have some, very, very decent wages, where they have great benefits. And the issue is, most of the people that work for the city are good guys. They come into work and they do whatever. What we have is just a lack of management, where you just have no flexibility. And people will say, well, geez, the city of LA is not a business. Jack, they're not in there to make profit. That was my old friend, Tom LaBonche. We're not in there to make a profit. Yeah, I agree with that. But, when you have 40,000 or 30,000 people working for you, that's a real big enterprise. It's got 40 or 50 billion dollars worth of assets. It's got, let's see, maybe probably 10, 20 billion dollars worth of revenues. I mean, it's a big operation. And I think you need to have this thing properly managed, as opposed to having these 15 jokers at city council telling everybody what to do, and they don't know shit from Shinola.
To use
That
it.
makes me think.
That's a technical term.
I was about to say, using a technical term. Go ahead, Laura.
It just makes me think that we need to start reaching out to the union leadership ourselves and just talk to them. They're us. They are us, and they should be able to communicate and understand. We might actually have a better way for them to do better in these builds that they're doing, or whatever it is that they're organized for. But I think if we don't bring them to the table, and we again leave ourselves out of that conversation, the cycle just continues, because there is nobody else.
Right.
Got
And
it.
another way, John, if I might add, another way this cycle continues is through the process of redistricting, which happens every 10 years. And we're in it now at the city, county, and obviously at the federal level. You've seen the recent announcements that California lost one congressional seat. So on top of the independent expenditures, behested payments, office holder accounts, you have to keep your eye on redistricting. And even at the local level, it's critical, because the whole point of this is to tie together communities of economic interest. Now, I'll talk about my own personal experience in 2012, because I did represent Skid Row. I represented downtown Little Tokyo and a large portion of South Los Angeles. And for most of my time, we had a redevelopment agency. So I was able to use tax increment to build over 5,000 units of affordable housing and over 1,200 units of permanent supportive housing with tax increment financing, because South Los Angeles, which was not generating a lot of tax increment, was able to use the money being generated in downtown from all the new construction and investing it in areas where it was most needed. And so, it's been very frustrating for me to sit here after 2013, when I turned out, and to see people talk about building affordable housing or permanent supportive housing for people who are homeless, but talk about it, not get it done. One of the other things that I did, which was critical, is to create an emergency shelter so that people didn't get arrested and put in a 72-hour psychiatric lockup, and then kicked back out in the street 72 hours later. These are the kinds of things that people have to look at within the context of redistricting. People who are jaded and cynical will use redistricting as the system of rewarding your friends and punishing your enemies, drawing lines which are conducive to, the politician or the elected official you like, giving them greater opportunity to oversee an area where there are a lot of potential donors, or a donor-rich district. And that's wrong. That's not what it should be about. It should be about making sure that nobody's community gets left behind, but we haven't gotten there yet.
Got it. I'm going to acknowledge our friend Grace Yu. I see she has her hand up. And before Grace speaks, let me also say that we've got another person on who is a candidate for public office, Lieutenant Eric Strong from the LA County Sheriff's Department. I had a great conversation with Lieutenant Strong earlier today. And if we have a minute before we wrap up, I think he wants to say hi and just share a few things with the group. But Grace, go ahead.
Hi, folks. So good to see so many of you, more than 100 on this call right now. I saw 110 earlier. What I want to encourage this group to do is let's fight back. If we actually put in a provision that we can pass to make our electeds accountable when they do things that are illegal, for them to lose, or they can't lose their pension, but they can pay a penalty, which, you know, to a normal person sounds like, isn't that the same thing? No, if we word it properly, and they have to pay back the monies that they've stolen or allowed to be used unwisely, I think that could help bring our electeds into line so that they actually will have to pay penalties. So I would love to see this group push for that. That can help bring changes into our city, local city government.
Thanks, Grace. We'll
I'd also like to say I will be running in 2024 for City Council District 10.
Outstanding. That's great. I'm sure you got a lot of support on this call, so keep up the good work. I thought I saw another hand up. Ray Bishop, did you have a question? Ray Bishop, you want to unmute yourself and ask your question? If not, you can hold that thought, because I think I see, was that Ray getting ready to speak?
You just unmuted. Go ahead, speak, Ray.
Yeah, I have an experience of being a lifetime.
Ray, it sounds like your audio is going in and out, Ray.
Okay, let me move my mic up. Can you hear me better now?
Yeah, go ahead. Now we can hear you.
Okay. I'm commenting more than I'm experience with that. But first, that even addressing this topic core to our very democracy, in my own thing, based on, you know, the buying for the people. But since citizens use buying for the power, elect those who are beholden to. If we speak up, you know, then you're an outsider, because the ones that are on the take and they operate in a private about those people who are not their idea of how the government really works, you know. And even for many, many years, I found that they say basically, Republicans are going for the money, we're going to go for the money. And, you know, I did panels on the influence of money and came under attack for it. Stand together.
Hey, Ray, I think we get the upshot of what you're saying, talking about the money in politics. But in fact, I think Ray may have just dropped off.
Oh, I'm still here. I thought maybe I was going on a little bit too long about this subject. No, I could go on forever about it, because it hurts. A person who's really going to make a difference in the world and county. Geez, you know, it's almost, if you have $1 billion to support people, you're not going to get.
Ray, let me ask you a question, because you're going in and out and it's hard for us to understand you. Can you, in the chat, can you send me a message on where you live, so maybe we can find out what organization you're close to and make sure you're connected with folks? Can you do that?
Well, you know, I'm a Vietnam veteran, and I've been an officer of the party. I've been a chair of the Business and Professions Caucus. I've been a
sounds like you've been doing your part for
I have quit. I got to the point where, you know, you can only take so much. I feel that being on this conversation, but the issue we have today that allows the huge merger and has been a tendency to a smaller group of people control the wealth of the world, and
Ray, we're
tend to
gonna
build.
Ray, I'm gonna exercise a little point of privilege here as the moderator, and I want to tell you thank you. I heard you say that you're a Vietnam vet. I want to let you know that we appreciate you, and you can find all of our contact information. I'm going to ask my co-host to recirculate the agenda so everybody can see our contact info, and also the rules, because we obviously don't have time to take everybody's comments. But Ray, we appreciate you, and I want to see.
Well, I'm on this this clusterfuck thing. 115 participants, Jan Perry and all that, and somebody called John Heath is the chair. I don't know who he is, but he sounds.
And who is this that's speaking right now?
But it sounds very much like they're playing Ain't It Awful, and it's interesting, but some of them are running for public office, some are not. But I don't, I'm.
Okay, so now, because folks are not, obviously, Michael or Daryl, if you guys don't mind posting the agenda in the chat, because we can't have everybody unmuting themselves and just speaking. That's obviously not going to work. And not to mention using foul language. I mean, you know, a little respect and decorum would be appreciated. If we have that problem again, obviously we'll have to remove people from the event. So let's keep it positive, folks. Nobody here is working with a hidden agenda. Of that, I can assure you. That's part of what we're trying to deal with. John Chung, I know you're in here somewhere, sir. Would you do me a favor? Are you JC? If you are, would you unmute yourself so I can spotlight you? Oh, well, duh, you can't unmute yourself. Wait a minute. Okay.
Hi, John.
Hey, that is you, right?
Yes.
All right. I was looking for your full name and didn't see the JC. So while I work on spotlighting you so everybody can see you, let me just say welcome to my good friend, the Honorable John Chung, who served as California's 33rd State Treasurer from 2015 to 2019. Before that, Controller and on the Board of Equalization. There he is. Welcome, John. He's one of the best people that I know, and I don't say that lightly. I can honestly say that I've known John for at least 25 years, back when I used to have hair. And he remains the same solid, dedicated public servant that he was before he got to his first elected office. So John, we appreciate you being here. We want to give you a chance to weigh in on this topic. And as somebody who's been in a variety of state elected offices, what do you see as the the one or two key issues that we need to focus on and work on changing to make sure our government is doing the people's business? Go ahead.
Well, it's a privilege to be with all of you. Always, John, one of the things that I try to make the hallmark of my service during my 25 years in public office, 20 years in elected office, was greater transparency. Right, Jack has expertise in budgeting. Jen was extraordinarily effective, and Laura's been incredibly visible and active. But it doesn't work unless there is an enlightened, educated citizenry. And frankly, government, when it's operating, doesn't operate to the greatest transparency as to information. And even if you do have that information, it's often extraordinarily difficult to parse through that information. And then you have a lot of people who participate in the process, including elected officials who frankly don't have the academic or professional background to make serious, thoughtful decision. I would get into debates, sometimes friendly, sometimes hostile, on the state's finances. And oftentimes people come to the process and they're not earnest. The qualities I mentioned that I like in an elected official are those who are serious as to the purpose, serious as to the responsibility, who are thoughtful, and people of goodwill. And I think we've lost in our public domain people of goodwill, people who, because of value set, because of backgrounds, life experiences, aren't necessarily going to agree, but who are unwilling to demonstrate the qualities of being able to try to be constructive. People bring in legitimate experiences, but they're unwilling to see past their own experiences and unwilling to pursue what is required to be a effective public policy leader in the process. And so as I started to mention, I used to get attacked consistently at the beginning because I am a Democrat, by Republicans and conservatives as the state's finances, right? And they were always looking for an instance where they say, John, you're wrong. And frankly, you're guided by the left. And I would say my counsel, I said, there's not a single Democrat, even though I'm the Democratic office holder, there's not a single Democrat on my Council of Economic Advisors, right? So and frankly, these are governed by people who have PhDs. So they bring a certain amount of theoretical and academic background to be able to respond. So let's try to eliminate and remove the political charge from this and understand we are going to work in a particular realm on this decision making. And then I would get these other attacks. They say, well, Department of Finance has different numbers than what you issue publicly. And I said, let me make sure that you understand this, right? I am SEC liable. So I can't disseminate incorrect information because I am subject to prosecution because I have investors worldwide who are depending on the accuracy of my information. You have to understand, right? The Department of Finance works by a separate set of accounting rules than the accounting rules that I work on. And so so that was a partisan charge that we all have to deal with. Later on, and I said, I'm not being partisan as to, advancing these numbers when I didn't pay the legislature governed by my colleagues in the Democratic Party, right? I became more unpopular with Democrats than I did with Republicans. And part of this is, the LA Times and other media would say, John, why are you playing politics with this? And I said, politics is the exercise of power. And yes, I will play politics, but on this stuff, right, we ought to be straight and have an understanding of the numbers, right? And I'm not trying to take on Governor Schwarzenegger, understand my role and responsibility. As the state's controller, one of my legal responsibilities to pay warrants. I have to pay the bills of the state of California. I was issuing 44 million disbursements, and poor Governor Schwarzenegger has his difficult set of decisions. The legislature has their set of decisions. Unfortunately, both of them have not come to the point where I and the people that I'm paying, whether it's the public servants or the vendors of the state of California or the recipients of the state services, are going to have sufficient cash in a few months, right? And then Governor Schwarzenegger, I forgot if he signed, it was a $103.4 billion or $104.3 billion budget. I said that the moment he signed it, that budget's out of balance, right? And everybody was upset with me. But a week and a half later, because one of the things I did as a state controller is on a monthly basis, posted states revenues, states disbursements, and states cash position. We were $1.5 billion out of whack a week after the governor signed the budget, right? And then finally, like a month, the next month, we've had an emergency session to figure out how we're going to get California through these difficult times. So part of this is the charge of getting your public servants to be honest with the information, right? Because if you don't have an honest broker with the information, right, you're going to have a lot of false arguments. So I'll start off with that.
And John, there's a word for that and it's called character, but just to follow up real fast, I thought of a couple of things when you were speaking. One is, people talk all the time about how, the issue is people don't sit down and have real open conversations with each other and everybody is more interested in, the political battles than in actually getting something done. So what was your reaction when you were dealing with people that, were under you and then in other parts of government when you were coming at it as a straight shooter, just trying to, make sure that the governor didn't do stupid stuff and mess up the state's budget? Did you find that people were really like, wow, this guy is really different? Or what was the reaction to that?
There was one of horror and anger, but others, the ratings agencies, posted the information. they posted it, the work that we did in the controller's office, and I had 1,300 great staff. And part of this is a passion. I was a staff attorney when Gray Davis was the controller. So I worked with a lot of these colleagues. So my second day in office, the first day was inaugural. I went to the various offices and I said, this is your office. And I said, I hope you love what you're doing. Right. And if you don't, right, we will help you, but you ought to think about something you're passionate about your work. And I said, I want you to be responsive. And I want you to do your work as if you're taking care of a loved one, family member, friends, because that's in fact who you are serving. And you need to be treating people properly. And I said, and I will give you credit, right? I said on our annual report, it shouldn't be about me, right? I want to put the work of you and your faces on our annual reports and over the walls so that people recognize that you're doing the good work, right? And I love doing it because part of it is, I was a staffer. And so I know how hard I work to make my bosses look good. And so people say it today. It's like when I was controller, I got the credit and I did the lead work for this, but I'll tell you, this was, for instance, one of the things I pushed for is greater diversity on corporate boards, right? More women, more people of color. That was my effort. I led that effort in the state of California in 2008, right? People are advancing it now. More people from the LGBTQI community, people who have more risk management expertise, especially including in climate change. And I said, that's Maylee Tom's idea, right? I pushed it, but that was Maylee Tom's idea. So I would talk about my staff whose idea it was, right? So people knew that they were going to go to work, they were going to work hard, but they were going to get public recognition for it because they deserve it. We pay decently in the state, but in a lot of positions we don't. And so anything you can do to make sure that the people who make you look good, feel good about what they're doing, we ought. If we had all those human exchanges, that we afforded a little bit of kindness and patience and goodwill, we would get over a lot of the travesty that's happening in our lack of human connections in this world today.
Absolutely, John. Thanks for sharing that. And also just the point that, there's enough credit to go around, get the work done, get the job done and worry about who gets the credit later. That's a great point. Since we're running about 5 minutes late, let me go to Q&A with the audience. All of our panelists are unmuted. I'm going to go, and if you guys have questions, just raise your hand and we will get to as many of them as we can. Lance Williams, I'm going to ask you to unmute. Then I'm going to go to Tess Taylor and James O'Sullivan, and we'll proceed from there. Lance, go ahead.
Thank you very much, John. This is a very, very interesting conversation. Just wanting to add a little bit of reality. My question is, what is the incentive for union leaders, for example, using one constituency, to take a different approach since they're benefiting from the current status quo? They probably don't see much wrong the way we're having a conversation, and yet the stakes are incredibly high. So how do we get that mindset of perhaps anything from fear to seeing that there's a what's in it for them? How do we change that interaction?
Got it. Thanks, Lance. Anybody want to take that? Laura, go ahead.
It's not sustainable. This process that they're doing is not sustainable. It's going to crash. Something is going to happen, and it's going to change. And so, being reasonable and coming to the table to talk about what we can and cannot do going further is important. We have to look at the sustainability of the old actions that are being taken. And yes, right now status quo is benefiting, but there's going to come a point, and it's coming soon, where that's not going to work anymore.
And thank you, Laura.
We haven't even begun to see the effects of the pandemic yet.
Sure.
On businesses and families and home ownership. And just to give you guys some context, I've been looking for an apartment. I sold my house, planning on moving out of California. My dad has Alzheimer's, so I decided I'm going to stay around. Wanted to go find an apartment that I can just go and be by myself, right? And this has been a little process, and I'm looking between $1,500 and $1,700 a month. Almost every single one of these people is asking for 3 times the amount of income, right, to the rent. I don't know anybody in Los Angeles who can do that except the 1%. And I'm fine. I'm in a position where I'm okay, but I'm thinking about everybody else that's applying for these apartments. You know, all the conditions that they have to meet, three months worth of bank statements, tax returns. You're like, this is the nuttiest process that I have ever been through. And then the bait and switch when you get there and you find a place, and then, oh, I'm sorry, it's $150 a month more, and you have to pay $150 for parking, and you have to pay $160 for utilities. So your $1,600 apartment just went to $2,000 pretty quick.
Yep.
So, you know, I really think that sustainability of process is important. And I think if we start having those conversations with the unions now, I mean, there was a point where I remember some of us were having those conversations early on. And I think it was before Maria Elena shifted and before Rusty took over, and then a little bit after Rusty took over, and now Rusty's gone. So, you know, there was a little bit of movement, and then the fear factor set back in again, and it all started again. So, you know, as we have these conversations, it comes back to that same thing of bringing the unions to our community and to our table, because they're with us. They're us, right? So the only difference between us and them is that they make stuff. They're out here doing this type of making stuff, and there's an organization around them making these things. So we're doing a certain type of work, and I think that it's important, and that we get smart about how we approach these things. There's all kinds of benefits that union labor can have that doesn't require funding, right? There's just numerous ways that things can shape out.
Got it. Jack, I saw you shaking your head at one point, and then I'm going to go to Tess Taylor. Go ahead, Jack.
Yeah, you know, it sort of reminds me that, you know, we had some recent negotiation with the unions where they deferred the raises, they did this, they did that, but there's always a quid pro quo. The only time I can think of when, you know, it really got really nasty was back in 1975 when I lived in New York City, and New York City was broke. And then they had to bring all the people together. They had Victor Gottbaum, they had Felix Rohatyn, they had Bill Ellinghaus, who was head of AT&T, or, you know, New York Tel or whatever it is. And that's when there was a crisis. Until we have a crisis, these guys are not going to give us squat. This is the public sector unions. They're out there for whatever they can get. You talk about pension reform. They won't even let Eric form a pension commission to study the stupid pensions. More or less come up with any, you know, recommendations. I'm done.
It would be easy.
Jack, you don't.
Definitely a challenge, but I have a lot of those same thoughts that Jack has. I do. I mean, I totally agree with what he's saying. And Jack, I'm gonna give you an apology from probably 15 years ago, where I used to get so frustrated with you about saying these kinds of things, being that loyal Democrat, and then having been engaged for this length of time in just the local system and seeing how crazy it is. Jack's now become my hero. So from back in the day, Jack, my apologies to you for giving you a rash over the last 10 years. I'm such a fan of yours now, and I think it's your voice, Jack's, and I'm telling this to everybody that's on this thing tonight. Read his articles. This is the man with the voice of common sense, and I really believe wholeheartedly that what he's saying is real. It's important, and it's him being in the weeds on what has to happen. And I think he's absolutely right. How we get there is going to be the fun little task and trick for us.
Got it.
Thank you.
Well, it's hard to believe that the homelessness and affordable housing situation is not a big enough crisis, but, you know, duly noted, Jack. Tess Taylor, can you unmute yourself and ask your question, please?
I have. Thank you. Can you hear me?
We can. Go ahead.
Thank you. So thank you for having me, and I actually wanted to make a comment related to an earlier remark when I unfortunately came a little late to the call. My name is Tess Taylor. I'm the president of the West Toluca Lake Residents Association. And you mentioned speaking up before an elected or running for local office. I'm running for my local neighborhood council. And
Right.
although it's too late to vote for me, I'm mad as hell, and I'm not sure if that's the most appropriate reason to run. But I think I'm fueled by hopefully righteous outrage, and I have been for over a year and a half. I concur with a lot of what's been talked about here today. I'm highly, highly fiscally conservative. I want to be on Jack's budget advocacy group if I can find the time. I think Jack Humphreville is smart, smart, smart. I echo what you said, Laura. Everybody read what he says. My campaign was for quality of life, rights of residents and taxpayers, because we're just being taken to the cleaners. And the unions are out of control. I think the council members simply acquiescing to their demands is outrageous to me. There's so much that is wrong with our system, but it's a system that we have, so we have to work within it to try to improve. I just, when you're dealing with city staff, there are multiple levels of incompetence. And we're paying premiums for this. We're paying so much for this. There have been problems in my neighborhood that people have been trying to get fixed for 5 years, and we can barely get a phone call returned. How is that possible? How are these people getting paid so much when basic city services aren't available? So I just want to echo a lot of what's being said. I want to thank Mr. Ray Bishop for his service very much, and John, to you for hosting this. One last note, I would say LA City Controller Ron Galperin, I think, has a lot of great information on his website. He's a straight shooter. People should review some of the audits and the programs that he's put together, which have significantly, I think, enabled transparency, which very much is needed. And I just want to thank people for being here. We have to pay attention to what's going on. And John Chiang, what you said is really, really, really important, that people have to come to this process who are serious and who are thoughtful and who are of goodwill. I'm seeing decisions made by people without even a shred of due process, with zero transparency, and with zero a consideration for the fact that they are stewards of the public tax dollar. I find this outrageous that people are just ready to give other people's money away without any consideration, research, questions, evaluation of what's working and what isn't. So I'm one of those people who sort of digs in and asks a lot of questions, and I'm happy to be here. Thank you. That wasn't really a question, but I just wanted to fit it in. Thanks.
Yeah, thanks, Tess. That your comments really cut to what John Chung was saying about the character of the office holder and those that are doing the public's business, right? If you have the right perspective and the right incentive, you're doing it for the right reason, then you're not worried about all the other stuff. But folks that are there for the wrong reason is where we are now. Anyway, let's go ahead. Yeah.
Part of this is the public officials' work schedule. Can be protected under the work product. But when the media would ask, would you open up your schedule? I said yes, right? Who are you meeting for, right? So I didn't deny meeting with billionaires, right? But I also met with people who are dead broke. One of the things that I created, perhaps some of you participated. My first job out of law school was working at the Internal Revenue Service, right? So when I went into that interview and they started talking about my finances, I was concerned, right? And I knew that everyday working folks didn't stand a chance against the tax agencies, whether for California or the federal government, because even honest taxpayers will run afoul of the law, right? It's so easy to mess up. So I started doing free income taxes for low income folks, right? So I drove an attitude amongst my staff at the beginning of the year, from January to April 15th, you're going to be tax trained. You weren't going to work in a public communications function, interaction function, unless you were tax trained in my office, right? And the people who walked through those doors who needed that assistance were some of the poorest of the poor financially, not poor in spirit, not poor in contribution to our community, but lower income, and that they deserve as much attention, if not more attention, than others in this state, right? So it's, how are you dictating values in your office? What kind of culture are you creating, and who are you going to place importance in regards to time, energy, and focus?
Yep, thanks. James O'Sullivan, you've got a question for the panel, sir. Can you unmute and ask it, please? And I'm going to ask everybody to try to keep it short and sweet so we can get as many folks in as possible. Go ahead, James.
Thank you, John. I really appreciate your pulling this meeting together. The question is, when are we going to go to war? And how big is the army? I keep coming to these meetings. I want to know how many people across California are as pissed off as I am, as I know most of these people are. And what are we going to do about it? Because the unions will not listen to you unless you have power, unless you have numbers behind you. Politicians won't ask you. I'm sorry, those of you who know me know I'm not a big thinker, I'm a doer. I want to get out, I want to march, I want to take over things, I want to go to war. And so I'm hoping at some point that the meetings can morph into where we can get an idea of how big are we? You know, where and what communities, because if they're going to take away our single family homes and now they're moving to take away small apartment buildings, if people aren't pissed off now, they never really will be. So that's kind of my question, and I'll comment it the same way. Thank you, guys.
I got it. James, are you originally from Los Angeles or are you from the East Coast?
I was born in DC, spent 20 years in New York, but I've been here since 79.
Your homeboy, Jack Humphreville here, who's another East Coast guy, he was resonating when you came on saying you were pissed off. So he's with you. Jack, did you want to say something real fast on James' comment?
Yeah, just one thing. I think we need to distinguish when we talk about unions. I think the focus that we're on are the public sector unions. You know, I don't have anything against the trades. I don't have anything against the steel workers and things along those lines. You know, but you know, the guys who are, you know, I mean, you know, it's the IBEW over DWP with union boss Darcy. You know, he's been a little quiet. You know, it's those are the unions that we're talking about. So I think we really need to, you know, make sure we're not trashing the private sector unions.
Right, that's a great point. And let me just say too, I'm certainly not the erudite member of this panel, but it's important to note that, you know, if we're really trying to solve this problem, you know, nobody is above reproach. Everybody needs to be willing to do some introspection and say, you know, what can we do better? I just saw somebody make a comment in the chat that made me think about this. You know, this isn't really about casting aspersions or throwing stones. It's really about being critical and figuring out what's led to our problems now so we can unpack it and figure out how to fix it and not go back down the same road. So, you know, on that basis, everybody, every institution, every union, someone else posted something about big tech and the real estate industry, these Wall Street vulture capitalists that have come in and bought up a bunch of single family properties and who are driving the whole SB 9, SB 10 forced density train. You know, these are all folks. I mean, at some point you have to be able to ask yourself, how much is enough? And is money your God, or are you in office to serve the people? I mean, those are some critical questions. And then to get back to the question that the last speaker was making, or the point that he was making, there's a lot more of us than you may realize. UHA represents 11,000 or so residents of Windsor Hills, View Park, and View Heights. Not a whole lot of folks, but when you add us up with Ladera Heights and Baldwin Hills and Leimert Park and Hyde Park, and the fact that we're connected with United Neighbors, which is a statewide coalition of homeowners and community groups, that's a few folks that can make a little bit of noise. So I wouldn't count us out. And I think that the more we organize, the more we really get serious about finding ways to have an impact, we may surprise ourselves. Any other panelists want to jump in, or shall I go to the next
John,
question?
I wanted to jump in, and this
Please.
is kind of directed to the other John, since he's been in Sacramento and he understands the machinations of running for office at the state level. So John, you and I both been around for a while, so we remember a time when there were no term limits and how that felt versus how it's going now. And you and I also remember the time when I believe pensions or retirement was eliminated for state representatives. So that may have been a stimulant to cause people to, you know, leave Sacramento and go for the local offices where they could accrue a pension. And that was sort of an unintended consequence of the imposition of term limits. You put that in there with the mix of a state elected official being able to transfer money from the state into a local race, and to use that instead of having to adhere to the rather stringent requirements here locally of, calling for one contribution at a time, and then obviously reporting it. And that's separate and apart from an independent expenditure where there are no limits. And so you and I have watched this evolution and seen the results of it. And I'm wondering, from your perspective, John, why do you think that the general public doesn't get more upset about that? Or why is it that people, in your experience, may accept the inevitability of a campaign because they may have the most money, or they may have the biggest independent expenditure, or what? Since your view may be more expansive than mine, since you've operated at the state level.
So it isn't more expansive. Jen, you are an incredibly effective public servant, and you understand how a lot of this works. If you're looking at everyday folks, right? If you look at the Gini coefficient, right, and that's a measurement of disparity. You have, and you're thinking about California, Los Angeles having extraordinarily disappointing numbers, horrible numbers as to the percentage that are paying, 1/3 of their take-home pay in housing, right, which puts them at great financial risk. They don't have the time when you look at our transportation systems. And so Rob Green for the LA Times asked me this question a long time ago when I was a public servant. He said, John, you said you're committed to climate change. You take public transportation. I said, no, I don't. I'm a public official, right? At the Board of Equalization, I used to average over 800 public events a year. Now as controller, I had statewide responsibilities. So I did 600 public events a year. As I said, I simply couldn't do it. But now that I've been out of office, right, I take public transportation now, being of a certain financial condition, right? I can, when the last bus that leaves from Harbor Gateway to Torrance, where I reside, right, if it's running on time, that last bus runs about 11 p.m. And if I get in at midnight, right, fortunately, I can afford Uber, but there are people who can't afford Uber to get, so it just makes it extraordinarily difficult in that process. But you have people who are just trying to make their lives work, right? And I was with Kevin Asable a couple of weeks ago, just catching up, right? We were talking about, I said, Kevin, let's write a story about how difficult it is for the people on that bus, a lot with mental health issues. And so when you're thinking about those concerns, everyday folks, I think, are upset with the system. You hear it in the voices tonight. But to be effective in the political process, in the public policy realm, in the legislative domain, is extraordinarily difficult, especially against those who are incredibly well endowed with, the machinery of communicating, the ability to mobilize voters, those who can sway messages with money. Now with digital media, you can affect it, right? But that's added a whole different set of issues to the political plate, not all constructive. So I think there are people who are very disaffected, who are angry, but simply just trying to, figure out what to do with not much money, because they're putting it in housing and transportation, the two largest expenditures, just makes it extraordinarily cumbersome for them.
John, the phrase for what you were just describing is manufacturing consent, right? That's what that political media machinery does, and that's what's so undemocratic about it. And we'll talk more about that shortly. Let me ask Connie. I don't see a last name, Connie, but I see your hand up. Can you unmute and ask your question to the panel real fast? Connie, Connye.
Yes, can you hear me?
You can, go ahead.
Oh, great, okay. Well, I want to thank you for having this meeting, because it is very helpful. I'm listening and hearing what everybody is saying. And it's, a lot of important points. And like John Chang and Jan Perry, I just, I'm happy to hear them and thank them for taking their time. And all the other panelists, thank you so much. But I'm listening with hope to hear something that we take away. I'm listening for a takeaway because the problems we're facing now with the virus and trying to get to herd immunity and homelessness it's just getting worse. It's just growing. Unemployment, there are more people unemployed than ever in history. And looking around at the price of everything, rent, food, material goods, everything is just costing. So the situation in the country is not something that we expected to have going on in 2021, but it is. And I just, want to share my thoughts because my thinking is we're looking at people we elected to serve us as public servants, our elected officials, who have really become enablers to developers and those with money to be able to make more money. And many of these developers are individuals from other countries. They don't even live here. So the things that are happening to us with the money that they're spending, they don't care about because their only interest is in profit. They focus on the profit. Their intent is to make money. And our elected officials, many of them are helping them. Not all, we do have decent public officials, we really do. But the ones that are enabling them, we are not doing anything about. I think we had one or two that may be going to jail. Thank goodness for that. But out of many others, one or two is not saying very much. So
Connie, I think I get what you're looking for, a plan of action and next steps, right?
Yes.
Got it. Okay. We have on the agenda, if we can get to it, the last 5 or 10 minutes tonight, we're going to go over some next steps and kick some ideas around so that we can go away with a somewhat of a concrete game plan. Jack, you wanted to point something out?
Yeah, just one point. When they talk about who's profiting from the real estate, a good chunk of it probably comes from our pension plans. CalPERS, the Lacers and all those, they're investors in REITs, they're investors in real estate companies, they put money into Apollo, all the private hedge funds. So it's not like it's Wall Street per se, it's just, our pension plans are right in cahoots with all of them.
Yep.
So I'll respond because they serve on CalPERS and CalSTRS. So Jack, yes, we invested in them, but we did not support that specific action. So from right to left, even our most conservative board members were opposed to Blackstone and others taking that type of action. So we let them know, right? They don't tell you ahead of time.
But they have your money, and you don't have any. Once you invest with them, you don't have any say. I mean, the funds that I've been in, I can moan and groan, or when we've been running them, tough luck, John. Tough luck, Jack.
Yeah, no, yeah. I'm not disagreeing about that part, but I just wanted to make sure that there was a nuance drawn. It's not like you knew ahead of time that they were going to do that and that you said that was okay, right? We said, in fact, right, when they were spending that money, we said, hey, that's not okay.
Yeah.
One possible takeaway, and then I'm going to go to our friend from Culver City, Dr. DeBenedettis, but I think there's some good points that have been made tonight. Obviously, in an hour and a half on Zoom, there's only so much you can cover. But the need to really educate ourselves and our fellow citizens as to the nuances of how this thing is really working, and even just listening to that exchange between our friends John and Jack, with their experience and perspective on an issue about pension funds and how those are managed. There's a lot of nuances here that you really have to be paying close attention to be following. And Jack, I dare say that, a lot of these folks that are working their agenda are banking on us not paying close attention. So information is power for sure. Let me ask Dr. Suzanne DeBenedettis to unmute herself and ask her question real fast. Suzanne, how are you?
Oh, I'm very good, and thank you, and kudos to all of the speakers. I too am a plan of action person. we are so overwhelmed with so many things. We have to stay focused with one at a time. SB 9 and 10 now, when we've all been talking about it, the housing is the really super hot button issue in Culver City where I live, but I think all over California. There's a lot we can do. CADEM, which was the California Democratic Convention, the caucus there wanted to support SB 9 and 10, and it was the trade unions who fought it to the point on the floor there that the party ended up taking no position. So we already know from, I think it was Heidi who said, let's befriend the unions and get to work with them. Let's get to work with them. Let's flood our senators and assembly people, you know, whoever this, and remember, Newsom has promised, what is it, over $500,000 a year toward affordable housing, whatever. So pressure on him with the recall, but we need to get organized. And I know John's a tremendous organizer, get behind, and then we can do, you know, phone-ins, we can do letters to the editor demanding. I'd love to see forums with these wonderful speakers tonight, Jan and Jack and John and Heidi.
Laura.
Laura.
Yep.
And let's make it happen. By the way, Liam SCAG, the Southern California Association of Governments, I just got their email, and they had the video of Liam Dillon, I think, or whatever his name is, who writes for the LA Times on housing, and he himself is saying what we've said tonight. One, the effects of the pandemic haven't even really hit yet. And when they hit, you know, it's almost, whoever said the game's over. So let's seize the moment because I know we can do it. Thank you.
Thanks, Suzanne. And yeah, following up on that point about a plan of action, you know, just organizing, whether you join United Neighbors, the coalition that's been formed to deal with SB 9 and SB 10 and these ridiculous housing forced density bills, or you join your local community organization, whether you're a homeowner or a renter, just getting organized and getting active around what's going on in your community is a big step in the right direction.
And you know, can I add just one quick thing?
Go ahead, Laura.
You guys are it. There's nobody else that's going to step up. So if you're waiting for somebody else to take action, you can't. You got to step in there and do it. And I'm not speaking to the doctor here. I'm speaking to everybody on this call. We have to step up, and we have to approach this as a statewide action and a statewide campaign, and we're the ones that are going to make this happen.
Yep, and I just saw somebody post something in the chat, and I'm coming to you guys, John and Jack, but there are a lot of organizations. Liverpool, California is doing great work. Susan Kirsch has another organization called not Consensus Builders, but Community Catalysts. So there's some good work going on. We just have to figure out better ways to get active and connect. John and Jack, go ahead.
Jack, go ahead. I think you're talking about something substantive. I was just going to point somebody out.
Yeah,
go ahead.
There's one person who I've sort of been following, who I think is doing very, very interesting work, and it's a guy named David Crane, who's up in the Bay Area. He's somehow affiliated with Stanford, and he has this thing called Govern for California. And basically what they're doing is trying to raise money for various candidates who are sane. That they're going to be, trying to attack the other post-employment benefits by putting people on Medicare, going after the prison union contracts. And it's sort of an interesting guy, and they've been able to raise a bunch of money and direct it to various people, both Republicans and Democrats, that, will sort of stand up to the machine, if you will, whether it's the public sector unions or it's, the lunatics up there. So David Crane, Govern for California, is an interesting operation.
Thanks, Jack.
And then I just wanted to point out, well, since I've been on, I haven't clearly been on the entire time. Jeff Pring, our county assessor, has been participating. I don't know if he was recognized or not.
He was, yeah. That's our neighbor in Baldwin Hills, John. But thank you for pointing him out.
Yeah, and I just wanted to mention, right? If you have any assessment issues, right, get on Chad and make sure he knows. And
absolutely,
frankly, kudos to Jeff for being on this. Right, a politician on a call where he's not featured, he deserves credit.
Well,
No
he
doubt.
deserves credit for the grant list going up 6% a year.
He deserves credit for actually trying to update the technology in the assessor's office, right?
Done a nice job with that.
That is not politically popular, right? In Sacramento, I pushed a lot of technology projects, right? People want to spend it for other projects. And part of the reason, and we see with our digital divide, is that it's hard to get through the political special interests to advance government operating more efficiently, effectively. When I became the treasurer, and I had an investment portfolio of $85 billion, about $22 billion was LAIF, it's local agency investment fund. So it's local government's investment money that they give to the state to invest. Let's say a particular city wanted to take $1 million out. Our technology was so backwards that to get $1 million to a city, they had to fax and call the treasurer's office, right? I updated, right? So it's all technology. But that, trying to get that through the legislature to spend those monies was nearly impossible.
That's the money that you would update the EDD system, stuff like that?
That's, that wasn't mine, but yes, the battles on how you update the EDD system, right? I was trying to update our payroll system. And part of this is you have to be patient with politicians, right? I used to get attacked all the time. They said, John has the major working on a modern payroll system, right? And it's failing. John Flynn, who used to be the Department of Technology leader under Pete Wilson, would go into the LA Times and attack me, right? What was never reported is we sued the company, right? Betty signed the agreement, right? Not disclosing the company, but you could just read in Times. We sued the company and prevailed, right? We found 2 whistleblowers saying the company was trying to cheat the state of California out of their money, right? So one of my 2 requests to Betty Yee when I left the office, I said, Betty, I want you to do 2 things, right? We're going to win this lawsuit, right? And I want you to not drop the lawsuit and take it to conclusion. And we prevailed, right? So people don't read everything right? Because they understand the entire story. And frankly, I couldn't say, right? I couldn't give our litigation strategy out in public. We got the whistleblower, right? And so we saved the state tens of millions of dollars, got to keep some of the free product. It was the first time in state government that we won a technology lawsuit. Okay, Jen, you're on mute.
Sorry. I apologize. I had some technical. I'm now on my phone, so I hope you guys can hear me okay. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, good. So I'm going to do my best to handle this from my phone. So bear with me, folks, because I don't have my controls and my normal way of doing business. Daryl, if you're on there, can you recognize and unmute Joan Sanger, please, so she can ask her question? Joan, you want to ask your question to the panel?
Yeah, sorry, I was still muted.
That's
it's
okay.
not really so much a question. I'm not local. I'm more an unofficial Jan Perry fan club director, but I just love Jan and I've watched a lot of what she's done for a long time. I've spent a lot of time around the world doing ethics programs in different contexts, but it was almost always government related. And everything I've seen is that there is no continuity really anywhere with a handful, when I say handful, 2 or 3 agencies I've ever seen anywhere that have a continuity of coming back to the table and reminding people why they're public servants and reminding them in staff meetings how decisions are made and analyzing them. That's one big thing. Now, the other in terms of public accountability at a higher level, I think everyone here wants to do that, and everyone here has some powerful coalitions behind them and people behind them that can help. When people are disenfranchised and things are done in the dark, which is really what you're talking about, I don't just mean disenfranchised from voting, I mean from participation. I think you've got to come back and say, okay, we know things aren't working. We know people aren't engaged. They can't be engaged because of other issues in their lives, and they really can't. So we have to figure out a way to create a citizens coalition that's a big coalition. And it's a coalition that operates all of the time in every context. Now, one of the things John just said is this idea that you don't really know what's going on behind closed doors, because you really don't. So to do the best thing, that I've also worked for politicians, to do it the best way you possibly can, to try to figure out what's actually going on, make sure people are aware, but that accountability level, and that includes making sure the press covers it correctly and covers it all the time and stays on the issues to keep the politicians accountable. I don't think there's any other way to do it. You can't do it piecemeal with a bunch of different groups. Neighborhood groups are great. All of it's amazing and they're huge. Why not do it all together and make those choices? Put someone in charge of it like a Jan Perry and have that happen. I don't see how it's going to happen any other way.
That's a great comment, Joan. Thanks for that. Any panel members want to follow up on that point?
So I agree. But with this addendum, you have to support media so that they're financially viable, but then you also have to hold them accountable. I know some earnest reporters and they would write half stories, which would be incredibly inaccurate. And we would challenge them, and they said, "We apologize to you. We know it doesn't tell the whole story. I'm under deadline, and I have I have a certain amount of words in my column." So we said later down, we need that corrected so that you add those, material sentences, right? So part of that is, you're gonna get hit. So somehow you have to figure out how do we enhance the media to have the resources to do a better, more accurate job, and also call out bad reporting.
So John, let me jump in here for a second. Thanks,
Please.
Joan. That's very nice of you. We've got the seeds of across the county relationships planted already. We've been on multiple calls over the last several months and probably got a lot of new people on here tonight. And I know we've talked about formalizing our relationships, and we have the advantage of technology now, and it doesn't cost us anything. I've watched the rise of a number of groups during the pandemic to build a large following and in an interactive and participatory way to become very, very influential. And people take note of them, not only locally, but all the way to Sacramento, Washington, D.C., because they wield a lot of influence. So I guess I would submit to the group that, maybe the takeaway, and John, you obviously need to wrap it up for us, but that we've planted some good seeds here tonight. Many of us have a lot of cross relationships and inner relationships. And I would guess that even on this call tonight, we're probably less than 6 degrees of separation for any number of reasons. And so I think we've got a foundation upon which to build. And even if it's the Accountability Commission or the call them out on their BS commission or whatever you want to call it, or a PAC or a coalition or whatever, I think we can put this together because people seem to be engaged enough, I think, on this call, which means they have friends who have friends who have friends, and we can continue to build this. I know I'd
Absolutely. Absolutely. No, I think you'll have a lot of seconds and thirds on that. And again, I apologize, folks. I had a little technical difficulty and got kicked off my my computer. But one thing I saw before we wrap up that I did want to touch on, we got into a conversation here in our neighborhood on social media about one particular candidate, the one I mentioned at the top of the call, who was being endorsed and compared to Jackie Robinson on TV. And one of my neighbors was asking about why that person is the machine candidate, quote unquote. And all I can say is when you look and see the only person that's got enough independent expenditure money to be on TV, I think Jan Perry talked about this earlier, and nobody else has that level of exposure. And all the special interests are lining up behind that person. Almost all the electeds are lining up behind that person. The LA Times comes out and endorses that person. I don't know what their endorsement process was, and I had an interesting back and forth with some of their people about that. And that's something we can talk about later. But the bottom line is, when you see all that, yeah, that's pretty much a machine candidate. And I'm sure if the panel thinks otherwise, you guys can feel free to step in on that.
I think I'm not muted, am I?
No, we can hear you.
Okay, great. I think what I said earlier, when you're in a campaign, and this is a large medium market, city and county of Los Angeles, and if one candidate or two candidates are on television and the other ones are not, you are at a distinct disadvantage. And if you are a grassroots candidate and you are raising money one contribution at a time, and you're up against a group that can do a media buy of $100,000 or $200,000 at the drop of a hat, you will be at a distinct disadvantage. And if you don't have the money to be able to tell the people who are going to vote, hey, look, this is David and Goliath. Do you want to be David or do you want to be Goliath? Then again, you are at a disadvantage. And what I said earlier is, more often than not, a person will get elected, you'll wonder why, and then, their objectives may be misaligned with your community or your district, because they have not a responsibility, they have an obligation to the people who funded them or the interests that funded them to take care of those interests. Because when somebody brings you in that way with special interest money, they can also take you out. They can even take you out in a recall, or they can take you out the next time around. So there's always that threat over your head when you are, stuck in that special interest loop. So who do you choose first? The people in the district or the special interest money to keep your job?
Yep. So as they say at the domino table, all money's not good money, right? That's an important principle. So listen, before I say thanks to our outstanding panel, and I'm sure if I unmuted everybody, you guys would get a rousing standing ovation. Let me ask Lieutenant Eric Strong, if he's on, if he wants to just unmute himself real fast and say hi to everybody. Lieutenant Strong is a candidate for sheriff of Los Angeles County. And I think he may still be on. Lieutenant, are you still on? Oh. He can't unmute himself. I got to find him and do it. Sorry, guys. Let's see here. There we go. Lieutenant Strong, can you unmute yourself, sir?
Yes, there I am. Can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you. Thanks for being
here. All right,
here.
good. Thank you, John. I really appreciate it. And good evening. Please excuse my casual appearance. We're actually out in Baton Rouge. My daughter graduates college tomorrow, so I'm representing the LSU there, but thank you for the time. This panel has been enlightening and it's been great information. Just a real quick blurb on me, and I won't take up too much time. 28 years in this profession, and the best I can come up with is that I learned most of everything I need in policing, either in kindergarten or from my mom. And that's to treat people with respect, to say thank you, to be considerate, and treat people how you would want yourself to be treated, and your family members to be treated. So yes, I am running for LA County Sheriff in the 2022 election. A couple of things that, you mentioned unions, you mentioned big money, you mentioned independent endorsement campaigns, expenditure campaigns, and I am not a politician. I'm really not. But I am learning quickly that it is the endorsements and the money. And as the Honorable Jan Perry just mentioned, if you have more media in this city, in this county, that is the politician that typically gets the biggest following. So I am out there on a grassroots level. I'll be the first one to tell you, I acknowledge that in law enforcement, there's a big problem. A huge problem that needs to be fixed. And I think the biggest part of that is first acknowledging it and coming out in the open and being transparent with it. I am looking to make some significant changes. I'd be happy if there's another time. Again, John, I know your time is wrapping up. I don't want to take up too much time, but if there's another meeting or if anybody wants to have any further dialogue, I'd be happy. But, full transparency is a must in this profession. And
Absolutely.
It's going to be something. Yeah, it's going to be something that is going to take not a lot of work, but a lot of work to get these unions on board. Speaking of unions, our law enforcement unions are spending a lot of money providing legal defense and protecting officers that don't even need to be officers. So that's a fight that I'm willing to take, and I'm not really looking for the endorsement of the union if they can't get with that particular message, because that's something I'm going to really have to sit down and speak with them about. But again, I have so much to say, and I don't want to take up too much of your time. But thank you, John, for the opportunity to at least speak tonight and get a bit of an introduction.
Absolutely. Well, thank you, Lieutenant Eric Strong, and everybody, please join me in thanking our outstanding panel, the Honorable Jan Perry, Jack Humphreville, Laura Velke, and my good friend, the Honorable John Chung. Assessor Jeff Prang, thank you for sticking around. And Andrew Corey from the LA Times, are you still on the call? I think I saw your name earlier. You can unmute yourself if you're still here, Andrew.
Yes, I'm here.
Okay, good.
Thank you,
Okay.
John.
All right. Thanks for being here. So we're going to let most of you go and say thank you if you want to follow. And also, of course, I got to thank my partner in crime, the wonderful Jan Reichman from Comstock Hills HOA. Jan, thank you, and your neighbors for co-sponsoring this event and being here with us. If you want to know more about Comstock Hills Homeowners Association, you can go to www.comstock hills.com. That's their website. And if you want to know more or contact United Homeowners, you can go to www.uhawh for Windsor Hills, VP for viewpark.org, or the easy default way is just UHA1979.org if you can't remember all that alphabet soup. But again, we really want to say we appreciate our 4 panelists for doing this. We appreciate all of you for hanging out on a Thursday night. Looks like we ran about 10 minutes over time. This will not be our last conversation about this topic, because politics and what we need to do to fix it is obviously at the heart of what we need to do to have a functioning Los Angeles and California. So the struggle will continue. Thanks, everybody. Thanks for coming.
Good night.
And have a good night.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Bye.
Bye, everyone.
Hasta la vista.
All right. Thanks, guys.
Good night.
Good night, Andrew, and everybody who's interested in talking to Andrew or listening, feel free to stick around.
Yeah, so I was interested in coming on and joining. I cover housing here for the LA Times, and was going to be writing a story coming up on SB 9, given the big changes that would bring to California, as well as people's neighborhoods, and given the controversy. I was just interested in hearing from folks about what you think about that bill and concerns that you have regarding that. And just FYI, because it's easier for me to get down what anyone would say, I was going to record the conversation, and also I have injured my wrist and can't type, so I actually have to as well. So yeah, I mean, if anyone, John, if maybe you want to start off and share some of your concerns as the head of the association.
Sure, absolutely. And by the way, speaking of recording, I was able to get my computer back up. Hopefully it won't take another dump. Let me see if I can. Give me one second. I'm gonna unspotlight so I can see everybody here. And Andrew, thanks for doing this. I appreciate you taking the time to cover us. All right, now I got my gallery view back so I can see everybody. Can everybody hear me okay?
Yep.
All right, so Andrew, just following up on the email string that we had going with your colleagues and some of the conversation we've had before. One of our biggest concerns was that looking at the Times and the way your paper was covering this story, it just seemed to be from the perspective of all density, all housing is good, and just kind of getting on that whole freight train of dumping on single family communities without really considering the fact that, number one, the folks really going to benefit from this if it goes through, I'm talking about SB 9, SB 10, are the folks that have the the resources and the skills to develop. And, you know, I'm thinking specifically about the Wall Street institutional folks. Those are the folks that, as we all know, have increased their holdings in terms of single family properties in South and East LA in the wake of what happened in 2008. And, you know, as a representative of one of the largest predominantly Black single family communities in Los Angeles and California, I got to tell you that really sticks in my craw, because it would be one thing if, when you looked at these bills, if you look at SB 9 and the specific language in the bill, there's a reference, I don't have it in front of me, but I'm sure, you know, you probably looked at the bill. There's a reference to affordable housing being an imperative cause for the state of California and some other flowery language. But of course, there's no requirement that the units that are produced as part of this legislation be affordable. So the question becomes, if this is really about affordable housing, you know, as somebody who works in the affordable housing industry, I have to call the question on that and say, listen, you know, you guys are not serious about creating affordable housing, because if you were, you would put some specific language in your bills that require affordability. And on top of that, you would put some resources in there so that you can subsidize either the, you know, the acquisition of the land, the development costs, or, you know, the rent or the purchase price. You know, one of those things has to be moved in order for it to be affordable. Otherwise, we're talking about more market rate housing. You're basically increasing density. And instead of having our neighborhoods being impacted by gentrification on the scale that they are now, you're going to have a hyper acceleration of that, because you'll be producing a whole lot more units that are market rate or above. And the issues that we were talking about on tonight's call earlier about the impact on people that are moderate income or low income is just going to be intensified. So that, you know, off the top of my head, that's kind of that's where I start with it. And then, you know, when you add to that the fact that I'm sitting here talking to you from my home where my family and I live, and I'm literally, if I stepped out on my front porch, I could see one of my neighbor's houses where a cross was burned back in 1957, a few years before I got here. So, you know, here we have a neighborhood that we had to fight. And, you know, a lady who was one of my mother's teachers when she was in elementary school, that was her house. Her and her sister moved in there. So, you know, but for a few neighbors that were welcoming, and my friend Janet Reichman will appreciate this. I'll see if I can dig up that article, but there's some very nice articles about some of the Jewish folks that lived in this community, and back then how they were reaching out to African Americans and trying to blunt some of that racist white supremacy crap that was going on to keep us out of the neighborhood. But, you know, when you add that to the mix, and the fact that this is now a historically African American community, and we have, you know, people that don't have our best interests at heart. And remember, I'm not talking about, you know, our neighbors that move in here. You know, we're not trying to be the Ku Klux Klan in reverse, if you will. We're welcoming everybody. But, you know, the institutional folks and the folks, when people come to buy a house over here and they're competing with, you know, Wall Street or whoever the big time real estate person is, that's really no competition. So, you know, if we want a Los Angeles that works for everybody, that's affordable for everybody, all income levels, we have to be very conscious about that. And I think we have to be collaborative. And the path that these folks are on, where they're basically eliminating local input and control over land use decisions, that's where I get off the bus. But anyway, I ran my mouth too long, Andrew. Somebody else may have some thoughts on that.
So, John, let me just jump in real quick. As we all grow older, and many of us are the children of the members of the greatest generation, and our fathers were able to get the GI Bill and buy that first house. And that still quite likely remains the greatest opportunity to transfer intergenerational wealth, is the equity that your parents build up in a house that you can pass on to your children, who by all accounts are probably middle-aged now. And you throw in everything that's going on in California, the lack of affordability. We don't have an abundance of housing that is affordable. We do have land. It's right in front of us. It's hiding in plain sight. COVID has changed everything, because we have large regional shopping centers that are overparked and present us with an opportunity to perhaps reconfigure the way that parking is utilized and repurpose that land for housing that is affordable for first-time home buyers, renters, seniors, families, you know, the incumbent worker, the middle-aged worker that's lost their job and has had to take their children home to the grandparents. So the grandparents are raising the kids while the middle-aged son or daughter has to go off and work somewhere else. So the discussion has to be much more focused on that and not just talking about it, but looking at ways to implement it, not only on the local level, but at the state level. And I know there is legislation pending at the state level, and I'm not going to get into the weeds on that tonight, to be able to take that land hiding in plain sight. When you think of some of the major malls, and now that COVID has impacted retail in such a dramatic way that we may never see retail, the likes of which we had before, with, you know, miles and miles of cars, you know, just gone. So there's land right there that we could work on.
Thanks, Jan. I see Lynetta McElroy has her hand up. Lynetta lives in Crenshaw Manor, Andrew, so I'm gonna ask her to unmute. Lynetta, go ahead if you wanted to make a comment for Andrew.
Yes, I live in Lamar Park.
I'm sorry.
And thank you so much, John. And, you know, John and Honorable Jan Perry, they were so clear, and they gave you a great summary as to how we feel. Almost. I am amazed you had the courage to finally come here after all the damage you have done with what you have written in the Times. You treat us like we are nobody, that here we are in our lovely communities finally. Yes, in the 40s, there were racial restrictive covenants. My father was one of the people in Los Angeles that talked to one of the attorneys to try to get that changed. But now we live here.
Uh-oh, did we lose Lynetta? Lynetta, your screen froze for a minute.
Uh-oh.
Yeah, it looks like Lynetta, you may.
You were telling the public that you want to take away the value of where we live.
Hey,
That we
Lynetta.
have when we read the Times.
Lynetta.
And we see how they.
Lynetta, can you hear me? Can you hear me? I think your audio may be cutting in and out because we lost about the last 20 seconds of what you just said.
Oh, I just.
For over the years have been against us.
I'm gonna see if maybe I can send Lynetta a message via the chat, because it sounds like she was right in the middle of making a great point. You guys can hear me okay, right?
Yeah, you're fine.
Okay,
John, I just sent her a message just now. I don't know
Okay,
if she got it or
thanks.
not, but
And maybe see if she can call in, Daryl. Maybe she's having, yeah, she just dropped off. So maybe she's having internet issues. She can call back in.
Yeah.
Let me go to our friend, Dr. Suzanne De Benedettis from Culver City. Suzanne, unmute yourself and go ahead and weigh in with Mr. Andrew.
Andrew, I don't see Andrew.
There he is. He's waving his hand at you.
John.
I'm right here.
Andrew, how can we work with you to work with us to get the voice of the people heard on this critical issue that once you put a footprint on the earth, it's going to take years to undo it? By the way, my doctorate's in social ethics and social analysis from USC back in 1977. I've been heavily involved in civil rights and social justice, and one of the lead people getting Culver City to end urban drilling. So from my background of SB 9 and 10, I have questions like, why is it important for a state legislature to throw away democracy and to throw away the environment to provide housing that's supposed to be affordable, but has no real provisions for affordability, and that the trade unions totally opposed at the recent California Democratic Convention? What makes people think, if there are legislators, that we have to lose the rights to local planning? So it's a total insult to intelligence, and it's a destruction of democracy. So these are questions I have that I'd love for you to interview these legislators who, you know, are thinking for us, but I don't know. Again, this is your job and I'll support you in any way I can. We know that affordable housing can only happen through government funding. And I'm sure if you ask the Honorable Jan Perry, she can back it up and she can show you actual things she did when she had the power to serve the people, as she did. Now we voted for Measure J. Measure J says at least 10% of the county budget has to be used for across a realm of things, one of which is homelessness, housing, jobs with justice, etc. The county budget, if I understand, is about 36 billion. So at least 10 million would be, 10% would be about 360 million. Now that 360 million, what if we took Measure J and started to revitalize the retails that have made it or are struggling to make it by building a top? And I've been working on a plan that actually puts more carbon neutrality in rather than sucks it out, which is the cost of demolishing our beautiful single family duplex neighborhoods to just spend and concrete cement is one of the most polluting things, and build all these things that destroy neighborhoods, etc. But so if we get Measure J and we do as Jan Perry recommended, you know, we tear up because we already, you know, asphalted so many places that we're not going to need because businesses are going under. Everybody's buying through Amazon and Walmart and the other, you know, mega stores that are online. So it's going to be a major shift. Let's be at the head of the curve and let's have you lead us, be the voice. By looking at Measure J, as I said, revitalize the stores and do it in a beautiful way where there's carbon sequestration by having rows of trees on the second and third level, and then the housing set back. So it brings about more quiet and less pollution. I mean, there's a lot more to the plan with, but anyhow.
Just to be clear, I mean, it's not my role to lead anyone or do anything like that. I'm just here, I'm writing a story about SB 9 and you know, what it could do to the state, and here to hear your concerns and understand the issues that you all have with it.
Right, and so when I said lead, what I mean is, and we all know, the way an argument is framed, the very words that are used in it starts to create perceptions in people's minds, you know, just as the manufactured consent, etc. And so, you know, again, anything I'm sure any of us here can do to support you writing the story that puts the voice of the common people like ourselves, some elected leaders who have done good, such as John Chiang, Jan Perry, and others, that creates the public discourse that's supposed to be the basis of democracy.
And Suzanne, that's exactly why, thank you for that. That's exactly why we're doing this. And we're glad that Andrew agreed to stick around so we could, you know, kind of collectively let him hear from the community. So thank you for that. Let me go to the Honorable Daniel Tabor, and then Pete Rockwell, and then Ken Herbst. Danny, you want to unmute yourself and weigh in with our friend Andrew?
Well, thank you, John, and thank you, Andrew, for staying around to listen to a very common occurrence, and that is people who are concerned about what's going on in their community, taking the time and taking the initiative to have what are objective conversations. Not everyone will agree, but we will respect the opinions of everyone. And I think, as John Heath said in his opening comment, that the concern we have is that the LA Times seems to have taken the position on the issue without first allowing the voices of dissent to have any sway. And so you're listening today will really provide that opportunity. I'm the president of Move LA. We, as you may know, are a transit-first public transit advocacy organization, but we moved into the affordable housing space because we recognize that smart growth, smart development is in tandem with transit and density and creating livable, walkable neighborhoods. And when John brought to my attention a couple of years ago the attempts by folks in the legislature to remove local control on zoning issues, and secondarily to attack what my parents, my grandparents enjoyed the opportunity to work, to earn enough money to purchase a home, to raise their family, as I began in my life to do, assuming the mortgage for my mother's house, paying off that mortgage, buying a second house to raise my family in. I want to see that same opportunity to continue to exist. SB 9 and the folks who have, as John described it very clearly, the folks who've used hedge funds and other financial mechanisms to acquire the despair and the homes that were lost during the housing depression that occurred in the in the 2008-2009 timeframe in South Los Angeles. We've seen the data. 20,000 plus homes are owned by hedge funds and private investors in South Los Angeles. We know that if SB 9 and their companion legislation moves forward, that they will be the first to hit the city of LA to apply for the right, and at that point they won't need to apply, but to begin to evict the current tenants who are in their single family homes, and to begin to develop and not only just change the character of that neighborhood, but to cause a tremendous impact on the public infrastructure that exists in South Los Angeles, because the legislation does not require a number of things. It doesn't require developers that seek to increase the size of their ownings to put in any additional public infrastructure to address the water, the sewer, the electrical needs of that. It doesn't require parking. And clearly, if I'm a homeowner and I decide to divide my single family lot, and I am not required by the regulation to make that new unit affordable, why should I? Why would I? This is a capitalist society, and folks are going to seek to get the maximum benefit for their investment. And under these rules and these conditions, what will happen is the neighborhood will be forcibly moved through eviction, and will change. And I won't just assume that it will be the challenge of gentrification, but let's put that elephant on the table and talk about how it will be a redesign of what is now a livable single family neighborhood for folks who've worked hard most of their lives to build the nest egg that was the American dream, are now being displaced by folks who've come in and said, let me profit and commoditize single family housing to the point where those who work, it won't even be about a livable wage, but those who work in a middle class environment will be pushed out of the neighborhood simply because the prices that are being challenged or that will be asked for won't be affordable. They won't be middle income prices. They'll be the maximum that the market will apply. And in this market environment, working class folks won't be able to afford to live in the neighborhoods that they grew up in any longer. So I want the Times to really understand and to look at all of the issues related to the legislation, not just this nonsense that's talked about it's an attempt to right a civil rights wrong of 40 or 50 years ago. There is no reality in that. The housing rules have been changed many times. The covenants that existed when my family bought homes in Inglewood, my mother and father moved to Inglewood when I was a child, no longer exist in these neighborhoods. These are, as John described them, these are historically Black and brown neighborhoods that, because of the ability of the financial markets to self-qualify, to allow the basic piracy that went on in 2007, 8, 9, now these single family homes, many of them are owned by investors, and they'll be first in line, first to benefit, and it will have nothing to do with creating affordable housing, because there is no incentive for it to be affordable. And I'll stop there and be available to react.
One thing, and then actually a follow-up. When I write on the news section, not on the opinion section, don't take any positions on things I write. Here to interview people and understand concerns and report about this bill. So just to kind of clarify that. But also, the bill does have you can't use it if there's been a tenant in the unit for at least 3 years. Then you kind of can't use some of these mechanisms. Is that a protection that you feel is inadequate? to protect tenants in these units?
I don't think it's a protection at all. I think it's a clause that clearly lawyers and or the advocates who are moving this legislation forward will find a way around very easily. It doesn't protect the neighborhood. It doesn't address the impact of increasing density in single-family neighborhoods will have. If you go from a family of 5 having 3 cars to 2 families of 5 having 6 cars, where's the parking? Where's the sewer? Where's the sewage? Where's the trash pickup? Where are the public infrastructure that supports this new family when the neighborhoods were designed, and in South Los Angeles, let's be real, were designed with infrastructures for 2 and 3 family size houses as opposed, for 2 or 3 persons living in a house, not 5 or 6 as we see existing now. So no, I don't think that's an accommodation that addresses any of the impacts that the legislation could have.
Yeah, and Andrew, there's a great analysis that you've probably seen that one of the folks in Sacramento put together of SB 9. But as Danny was saying, it really is stuff like that. When you see that stuff in a bill, it really is just, in my mind, an effort by the folks who wrote it to try to blunt what will be the obvious impact. And then later on, once it's kind of like once you start down that path and you have these conditions that try to make it tenable or palatable to the folks that are being impacted by the legislation, that can easily be amended out or changed later on down the road. So, again, let's be clear about what the intent is. We have a community that has prided itself and is focused on ownership, on equity. And now we're gradually being transformed into more and more renters. Nothing wrong with renters. My business is all built on low-income renters. So, those are my neighbors. We love them. But, to convert an existing single-family home ownership community into a bunch of renters, there's no way you can put a happy face on that.
And multiply.
Yeah, why do you see that as why do you see home ownership in the community having a lot of homeowners rather than renters as something that's important to you?
Well, I'm glad you said that. If you look at, let's just take Windsor Hills and View Park, for example. If you look at our community, you can clearly see that along 54th Street, along Slauson, along some other areas, there are more dense, there's, small low-rise apartments, triplexes, duplexes. So you can see the intention that went into, adding density along those commercial corridors where density makes sense, close to transit, close to business, et cetera. So, again, this gets back to the point of having some local input. The real issue is how can anybody from way in Sacramento, issue an edict that's going to work for all these disparate, diverse neighborhoods with no chance for local input. So it's not even what I think is important about home ownership versus renter. They're basically coming down here to tell us how that's going to work. And that, aside from the fact that that's undemocratic, if you really want to get affordable housing, if you really want to encourage folks to become homeowners, to have affordable housing that they can either buy or rent, you have to do that with some intention and some consciousness.
There's another thing, John, let me just say that middle income renters pay an inordinate amount of tax because they don't have the write-offs that a homeowner would have in order to balance out their earnings and their income. So when you own a home, when you have an investment that you've made for your family, you have a number of within the tax code, a number of benefits that don't exist when you make the same income, but you're renting an apartment. So you're in a sense penalized for deciding to reduce your economic footprint and be a renter and participate in the economy in that way. Where when you're a homeowner, you're in an ability to then to leverage that investment that you've made in that home and in that neighborhood and write off some of that expense. So eliminating home ownership in historically Black and brown neighborhoods where it has been the desire, the hard work, the effort, the benefit of buying into the American dream, and then to turn around and to be forced because of price out of that opportunity in the next generation is not something that we stand idly by and will allow to happen without bringing to the attention of you and others what this really is about is an attack on a true American value, and that is home ownership.
Well, that's actually interesting. Is I've talked with some of the supporters of the bill, and they'll argue that this will produce more housing, not low income quote deed restricted affordable housing, but kind of less expensive than sort of other options on the market, either maybe the single family house that was there before or sort of the new renovated house next door, and that some of these new units will hopefully be ownership units and be
hopefully be John. I mean, hopefully be Andrew, if that's the best.
Yeah, well, no, I mean, this is what they're saying. And so what I wanted to ask you is, do you see that as likely to happen? What do you see as likely to be built from this bill?
There's nobody in business that is going to reduce their prices because the people that are selling to can't afford. All right, let's start there.
Not without some kind of incentive or subsidy. That's the point.
That's right.
Yeah, and it's not.
And there's no incentive or subsidy in the bill.
Just to clarify, it's not like it would be kind of like taking, the house that's selling already for $800,000 and creating, this is what someone described it to me, creating for $750,000 house.
Right.
So it's not like we're dropping this down to like 200,000 or something.
Yeah, no,
but this is the argument, and I'm just wondering if you think that's unlikely, and if so, why, and what you all think.
What's the incentive? What's the incentive to an investor group to build affordable housing if there's no public subsidy to challenge them and requirement for them to do so? They're investors because they're trying to make money. If they have an asset and they're going to maximize their asset, there's affordability doesn't come into the paragraph.
Right.
It's not part of the sentence.
Quality of life and entering into African American.
Hang on 1 second. Is that Helen Maxwell speaking?
That is
John,
yes.
Okay,
John,
right.
I just want us to look at the quality.
Hold on 1 second. Hold on 1 second, because I got to maintain some kind of order.
I have to. I didn't realize we'd be on this long. My computer's about to die, so I need to go get I need to plug in.
We'll wait for you, Andrew. Go ahead.
Okay, 1 second.
Take your time.
Hey, John.
Go ahead, Daryl.
Oh, just wanted to let you know that Lynetta McElroy is back. So
I saw her, and I'm going to come to her. And Helen, that's what I was about to say. Please hold your point, because if you raise your hand, I will see you, and we will get to you. Andrew's got to get a cord to plug his computer in. So just hold that thought. I know I could tell it was a good one because my mother was nodding her head when you were getting ready to say what you were saying. So hold that thought. Hold that thought. Lynetta, we're going to come to you. And then my friend, who was the gentleman that had his hand up? And I guess
Rockwell, Mr. Rockwell.
Yeah, did he drop off?
Let me see. Peter, is Pete Rockwell, right?
Yeah, it looks like he may have dropped off, unfortunately.
John, can you hear me?
Yeah, is that Robbie?
Yeah, for some reason, I'm not able to raise my hand. Plus, I have to be walking through the house. But if at some point I would be allowed to speak, I'd appreciate it.
Yeah, we'll come to you, Robbie. I know. Yep. Yeah, we got to get your voice in this for Hyde Park. So Lynetta, you're next as soon as Andrew comes back and tells us he's got some juice.
All right, thank you. I was advised to not have my video so that would help the sound quality.
Yeah, sorry we dropped you, but I was trying to tell you that you were, we had lost like the last 30 seconds of what you were saying. So maybe you can back up and start from where you got dropped.
Thank you.
And thanks to everybody for staying on this long. Wow, it's 8 o'clock. Andrew, you're back?
Yes, and I am all charged. So thank you for bearing with me. Did someone else want to say something about their concerns with the bill?
Yeah, I'm going to ask Lynetta McElroy to come back and pick up where she left off. And also, Andrew, thank you for asking questions, because as a reporter, I mean, obviously, we don't want to just be talking. We want to give you a chance to ask questions and get some good answers. So, Lynetta, go ahead.
Yes, thank you very much. And I do apologize, everyone, for the technical difficulty that I had earlier. Andrew, as I was explaining, that the narrative that the LA Times use and other publications and a lot of our electeds, they're saying that to be the great equalizer is to take the properties that we now own, that we now fought for. because understand, it was much harder for us to get these loans. You understand? You see, when I got my property 33 years ago, they weren't even giving African Americans the kind of interest rate that we were able to get. Only one person I knew that had that. So what my point is this: these are hard fought properties. How many children are you raising, Andrew? How many children are you raising?
I'm not raising any at the moment.
That's the problem. Because a lot of the people who are telling us that we should live in these small apartments are people who have no spouse, have no children. What do you care about having your children, having their parties, having their having recreation, having a front yard and a backyard? It's irrelevant. And so the problem is that the people who are speaking loudly, who have a voice generally, are the people who don't have any skin in the game. But my point that I was making earlier, I do notice, and please bring this back to your other editors, I've noticed over the years that the narrative of African Americans is usually that we are, I'll say, not as intelligent and not as well thought individuals as others. And it seems that the only positive comments that I really see are those that are, say, those few Blacks that are entertainers, those that are, let's say, athletes, that type of thing. But back on the point, the fact that you even asked that question is part of the problem. You truly do not understand.
Which question? Sorry.
What was why are we concerned about owning our property?
And that's why
the fact that you would even ask that question, it shows such a lack of knowledge and history that, again, this is the problem that we do have with papers such as the Times, because they get people who have no background, who are just, and this is why people like yourself, and I don't mean to put you down, please don't, but I am here. I want to make you uncomfortable because I want you to think carefully of why we are fighting so hard to retain the properties that we have. And when over the years, the damage that has been done by the Times specifically and other publications stating that these bills coming out of Sacramento are going to be a panacea for the homeless situation, and the fact that because we own a home that we're somehow responsible for homeless people, and that is an incorrect drawing. That is incorrect. But my point is, again, I want to thank you very much. I'm going on, but I'm gonna say very concerned and upset. I'm glad you're here. I wish you had been here about 3 years ago when you first started that narrative. Thank you.
I would love to chat, offline afterwards because we have a lot of questions.
You know what, please drop, could you please drop your information?
Yeah, sure.
In the chat. There was a video that was made by NBC Universal of me stating some of these same facts and actually going through the community and showing what will be damaged and destroyed if SB 50, 1120, 9, and 10 would become into our legislative history. So if you would please do that. You can do that privately if you would like.
Yeah, I'll share my email in this afterwards. Anyone's
great. Thank you so much. And thank you, John. And thank you everyone for your patience.
Just that, there's not, some narrative that me or the editors set here. We're trying to understand what's going on and report on these bills and do an accurate job at that. So,
excuse me, it's never been accurate because it has never said what we feel and what our experience is. It's always been one-sided, pretending to be unbiased.
Well, I'd love to chat after this and learn a little bit more about what you feel has been left out of the coverage or where we're missing some of the coverage.
Yeah, it's just perspective, Andrew. It's, Lynetta is spot on. And that's pretty much what you saw the email string that I got into with your colleague over the weekend. It's just getting the full story and not just, when you just cover the one side and we have to kind of fight to even get a foot in the door. I mean, not that we're not used to that because that's how we get down, but, and then for you to come, and again, no disrespect to you personally, but for anybody to come and represent that they're trying to be objective and observe journalistic standards, it's kind of like Lynetta was saying, it's like, man, we should have had this conversation a few years ago.
John, may I ask Andrew a couple of questions?
Sure, one of our panelists wants to speak. Go ahead, Laura, then I'm coming to you, Ken. Go ahead, Laura.
So Andrew, thank you for staying in. I know this is an uncomfortable situation, but I think the tone and what everyone's trying to get across to you is that you need to ask better questions. So let me give you a couple of questions that you might want to consider asking. I would ask these elected officials, why is there an assault on single family housing when there's no affordable? That should be and get a clear answer for that. Ask them about the trickle down economics theory that somehow in 20 years, people will magically be able to afford these properties. I would say one thing we haven't even talked about is how TOCs are affecting single family home ownership. So in those situations, you have single family homeowners who, if the city or the county makes some skeezy deal with a developer, they've now just lost their ability to sell their property. And I actually had a CEQA attorney
Are
say—
you referring to the transit-oriented communities
Yes.
program that the city has?
Yes.
Okay. And then what are you, sorry, I don't quite understand what you're,
So
we'll let you go.
So a transit or so on any TOC, they can folks can build right next to single family houses. And so what's happening is lots are being bought, split, and then
But it has to
rezoned.
already be zoned for something
No,
higher.
it does not.
In
You
the
need to do-
city's program, it does. Yeah.
You need to do your, Andrew, you need to do your homework. That's not correct.
Are we talking
So-
about the city's transit-oriented community?
The city can decide anything is a transit-oriented property. So the planning
We might be
department can
talking-
be. We're not talking about different things. We're talking about the same thing. So if someone from if there's a property within that zone, right, then developers have an ability to develop the property with fourplexes, duplexes. I have some neighbors in Northridge who have been going through this. So they had a property split. They decided they did some skeezy deal with the city of Los Angeles. Everything went under the radar. It happened during Mitch Englander's tenure. These people got screwed, and now they have a 5-story building next to their house that has 6 units in it, I think, that is literally 10 feet from their property. Their home value just dropped. They can't sell their home to another person, but they certainly can sell it to other developers. So that's the other scam that's going on, right?
Yes.
So people that can afford to spend the money will buy those properties, and that's how all of these neighborhoods go down, right? They just start falling down right next to each other, and you wind up having all of these buildings. So you see this adamant fight against density popping up in the middle of no density neighborhoods. That the fight is about stopping that from happening because we don't want it steamrolled. And then the last thing I think you should be asking the legislators is, why are they so focused on single family housing? Why don't they change the density bonus? Now, to me, I think the answer is because the developers will start to cry, because that's where they're going to lose their money. So it's easier for politicians to fight us than it is to fight developers that are loaded. This is an international lobby. It's not a small amount of money that's being pushed. This nonsense about not having housing, we watched it happen. We watched this all go down over a 10-year period where suddenly the planning department and Eric Garcetti claimed we had no housing. It's not an accident, it's tied to the Olympics, but then we go from 150,000 units needed in Los Angeles to 450,000 units.
Do you think we need more housing?
Day to day, sorry?
Do you think we need more housing?
I think we need more affordable housing, which means we change the context. And I've been saying that from the very beginning. I've been doing land use in the Arts District for 11 years. This is not new news. And the fact that you don't know that, or that the time staff doesn't understand that, means they're not doing their homework. They're
Doesn't understand what?
What I'm telling you, what I'm saying to you.
Well,
So your talking points, which you understand as a reporter, tells all of us that are on this call that you're not talking to the other side. You're not analyzing what the actual effects on these communities are. You're just kind of rolling with whatever the narrative is being proposed. I went back and I looked at the YIMBY group that had started this whole group. This is like maybe 4 years ago. The company that was funding them was run by two 30-year-olds who claimed to be independently wealthy and that they were running all of this themselves and that they raised all the capital to fund this enterprise. And then come to find that their entire portfolio was covered with Chinese developers. Now, God bless them. They have every right to be developers, the Chinese, not mad at them for that. But what I am mad about is international influences, even massive corporate influences, basically corporatizing they're turning this country into a group of land barons, and us only being able to be renters by the time they're done. And that's not that far away if they run this course.
Right, and taking away our ability to have any say-so about that.
Exactly.
Process.
And that's exactly what this lineup has been happening with Scott Wiener and Tony Atkins. And how many bills have to go by and through this legislature before everyone says, okay, we may be on the wrong track. Maybe we should look at changing the density bonus, because I guarantee you 60% they're going to figure out how to make this stuff work.
And Andrew, if I can step in, Laura, that point, the distinction about do we need more housing or do we need more affordable housing, that's a critical point for me. And in fact, City Controller Galperin's report, as you know, made that distinction and talked about the disparity in terms of how many market rate units are being produced every year versus how many affordable units. And we really need to flip that, because at the end of the day, we don't have a shortage of luxury market rate housing. We got a shortage of housing that's affordable for people that are making 120%, 80%, 60% of area median income. Those are the folks that can't afford to live in Los Angeles, and therein lies the bane of our,
paycheck to paycheck.
You can draw a direct line from that to the homelessness crisis and the whole thing. Yep. So that's really, anyway, let me see if I can get, because I don't want to keep you guys on. We can talk a long time. Both of my grandfathers were preachers, so I'm happy talking. Andrew, were you going to say something?
Oh, no, just that I was going to put in my email for folks.
Okay, good. Ken Herbst, Helen Maxwell, and then we're going to close out with our neighbor, Robbie. Ken, real fast, go ahead.
Hey, John, thank you very much. Try and be really brief. I came in a little bit late and, oh, goodness.
Somebody knows you're on Zoom, man. They're calling you.
That was a guy who's very involved in the community. I look forward to talking with him. I just want to, share with you guys. My family's been here in Los Angeles, I think roughly 100 and something years, 102, 105, whatever that number is. My grandfather worked for the Department of Water and Power. And Jan, thank you for, I believe you signed or endorsed when he passed in 2013, I think my sister had it, just an acknowledgement of his service with the Department of Water and Power. But beyond that, I'm a real estate broker. Most of what I've done over the last 20 years is commercial. I want to thank you, John, for all the work that you do. And I'd hope to just put a question out there, maybe to Jan or anybody who feels comfortable addressing it. I've been tracking or somewhat involved in the mall deal over the last 9 months or a year. And I kind of had hoped to hear from people about the Hyde Park district where I grew up, what I affectionately call Black Beverly Hills. I'm not an expert on SB 9 at this point. I was kind of Googling it and looking at it as you guys were talking and discussing. What'd you say?
Yeah, I don't think she knew she was not muted.
Anyway, I think the things, housing, equity, all these things are important. And like John just said, I imagine we could go on for hours on these topics. There's a lot to it with homelessness and all. But I was wondering if anybody had thoughts about how much affordable housing, if any, should be a part of the mall deal. I heard Jan say, and again, I don't want to make this too complex a question, but I heard Jan say there's land right here in front of us. John, you and I, 5 years ago, were looking at different pieces of land around Los Angeles that are vacant, but how much affordable?
Let's stick a pin in that one, Ken, because I don't want to take the talk in a different direction. Let me keep it on the single family stuff for now. And if we have time at the end, we'll circle back on that.
So could I just nail it with this one then? The ADU, I got here again a little bit late, but I kind of wanted to hear somebody touch on the pros and cons of the ADU there in single family up on the hill. And Jan,
Okay.
if you could touch on that, if you would, please.
Let me, Jan, do you want to take a stab at that? Because I really want to get Helen and Robbie and
Let Helen and Robbie jump in, and then
That's
we have,
fine.
and
Okay.
otherwise, Ken, I can call you on the phone. Because,
Okay.
That's fine.
but yeah, I
Helen
can
and
talk to
Robbie,
you.
yes.
Yeah,
thank
I
you.
am not a realtor. I have no experience in this, and I want to talk from a resident
Go ahead.
who lives in View Park. I'm really concerned about this bill for two reasons. One reason is that it really has a very serious impact on families that are here now, middle-class families and working-class families. And I do feel strongly that there are other options besides destroying communities. And that's what that bill will do. We don't have parking, we don't have space. We have that now for our kids. The density, the noise factors, why would you want to destroy that? And usually when these destructive things take place behind somebody else getting rich, they start in African American, Black and brown communities. So this to me is an attack not only on us who live in the community, but also us who are of color. And I think if you talk to people about what this means to have all of this density, to have all of this building and all of this to happen in communities where they're designated as historical landmarks. Why are we destroying Los Angeles just for someone else to get rich on? So please start talking to residents about what it means to them every day to have this happen to them, this type of destruction.
Thanks, Helen.
Helen,
Robbie?
if you could shoot me an email, I dropped it in the chat. Would love to talk more in depth with you, in coming days or something like that.
Helen, did you get Andrew's email address?
Oh, let's see, Andrew.
It's in the chat, in like the public chat.
Right. These legislators have no sensitivity. They have no regard for the people that they're serving. They really don't. If they did, we wouldn't have this bill.
And remember, Helen, the two principal authors of these bills, SB 9 is Senator Tony Atkins from San Diego, and SB 10 is Senator Scott Wiener from San Francisco.
Okay. Well, of course, they would not care about people in Southern California. And I think we're a model community. Why are we getting ready to destroy that? I have no idea.
Robbie Davis, you want to step in?
Okay, can you hear me?
We can. Go ahead.
Okay, hi, Andrew. My name's Robbie Davis. I am a board member with the Park Mesa Heights Community Council. Those are three distinct communities: Hyde Park, Angeles Mesa, and View Heights. For the last 5 years, we have been fighting SB 10, SB 50, SB 1120, and now SB 9 and 10 with any number, at least 5 other bills. So I want to be as direct as I can. This is not just talking about the quality of life being impacted. This is talking about the annihilation of specifically the Black community, because everyone else has an option. You can go to East LA if you can't live in what I call the Crenshaw community. And right now that Crenshaw community extends south of south of the 10 freeway, all the way up to the Inglewood border down Crenshaw. What we have happening is a massive land grab. First of all, of the Crenshaw corridor. The commercial corridor is literally being given to developers. Every other minute, a developer is coming before the Plum Committee of Park Mesa Heights Community Council, advising us that they are of great benefit to the community, wanting to erect residential housing, not family housing, single one-bedroom apartments, allocating no parking space or little parking space. So this is about a fight to remain, because It's about, first of all, anybody being able to buy the land, because as was mentioned before, we are a transit-oriented community. If you're 1/4 mile of a bus or 1/2 mile of a light rail, that's who you are. We are the poster child. We have a light rail traveling at grade level down the middle of Crenshaw Boulevard, getting people to the airport. We didn't need a light rail to get to the airport. We're 15 minutes away from it. But what is happening is businesses, as a result of having this light rail at grade level, were totally destroyed. Now those businesses, that land is also available to developers. Rather than supplying 100% commercial space at the bottom level, because of the density bonus, they want to put in as many units as they can fit. There's no economic empowerment to the community. So when we get to SB 9 and SB 10, now you want to come and make inroads into the community. I'm a homeowner. I've been here for 30 years. My next door neighbor, he was here for 50, and the only way he got to be here was that he had a Caucasian friend who purchased the home and then claimed it over to him. But what I'm saying, Andrew, it feels really disingenuous when we see that your articles or whoever is writing slides it towards, oh, here's a provision for affordable housing. The question is, affordable for who? Not the existing community, but you're making pathways for people who can afford perhaps to come in and occupy some of the housing. But I look at what is happening with the Crenshaw Boulevard is that it will literally be a Las Vegas row where people fly in and out into these single unit or 1-bedroom apartments. And it has nothing to do with this community, View Heights, Angeles Mesa, Hyde Park, Windsor Hills. We go from 0 income to more than 6-figure income. And we've all been living here. And we think that we have a right to continue living here. But when now you have Sacramento wanting to come and place any either greater impact, negative impact on the community. I have a piece of property. I could fit 6 units on my property. That's not what I want to do. But if someone not necessarily as informed as me sells this to a developer, guess what? Right between 2 single-family homes, that's what you'll have. None providing market rate housing, not providing parking. Where is the benefit? Here's the issue. We are accruing no benefit, and it's a massive lie when we see an inclination of the times to side with the YIMBY movement. And the only problem with the YIMBYs is that when they say, yes, in my backyard, they're talking about our backyard, not their backyards. So I think at the very least, what you should be doing as a reporter is you should be coming to where the rubber meets the road. You should be talking to people on the opposite side, because as far as I'm concerned, in Sacramento, either they're illiterate or they think we're ignorant to propose some of the bills that they have placed before us. And I think, you know, as Lynetta expressed her anger, for once I've been in a meeting where there was maybe a more strident voice than mine, but I experienced quiet rage that the founders of Los Angeles, the majority of them being Black Mexicans, are now being invited to leave massively. And that's what my fight is about. That's why I continue on the council that I sit on, because it's going to take having some truth truth being spoken. You are in a magical position. If you say that you're not about opinion, please be conversant with at least Senate Bill 10, Senate Bill 9. If you can read it, you would be able to see, hey, this is not about creating affordable housing. There's nothing happening in the Crenshaw community that in any way attempts to direct itself to supplying housing.
Sounds like, did Robbie drop off? Robbie, just to kind of put a fine point on what she said, not that she needs it, but that point that she made, Andrew, about affordable for who, that's something that we hear. And of course, this is an industry that I work in. So even though rents can be set at, affordable levels, you have to really know the particular submarket that you're in, because, you could set a rent for somebody who's 60% AMI and still not get any prospective takers because the rent level is still too high for the folks that are looking in that area. So that again circles back to why it's so important to have local input and local control and some kind of collaborative approach to this, and not just, some folks trying to make edicts from on high. So anyway, I don't know if we beat that horse to death. I see, is that Joe Steins raising his hand? Go ahead, Joe.
Can you hear me?
Sure, go ahead.
Yes, I'm Joe Steins from the Miracle Mile area of Los Angeles.
Welcome.
Thank you. I see on the chat, I see that it says to email Aaron, but it doesn't give, or Andrew, but it doesn't give his email address.
It should be on there. I can drop it in one more time for you.
Just say it once. Could you say your email address?
Oh, sure. It's Andrew, common spelling, ANDREW, period. And the last name, which is spelled KHOURI at latimes.com. And the last, okay.
Yeah, and I just reposted it too. So
thanks, Bill.
Anyway, hey, this has been a good conversation, folks. I don't know. I mean, I don't dare say anything after Robbie spoke because she pretty much laid it out.
I might say one more thing. I mean, is there anything that anyone didn't add that they would like to in terms of the concerns you have about SB 9, or sort of maybe an issue we didn't address about?
You know what, Andrew, I would say real fast, not to get back down in the weeds of the issue, but just in terms of, the idea of the panel was to get people together to focus on what we can do to fix our problems with politics. And, I think it's telling. I've been in several venues, social media, and I was on a call. Dr. Suzanne De Benedettis from Culver City invited me on a call, and there were some folks from the quote unquote YIMBY group that were there. And I was trying to engage and kind of say, hey guys, let's have a real conversation about, if you're serious about creating affordable housing, let's sit down and really go through that and talk about the things and the pieces that are required to do that in an effective way. And I do not see a lot of movement from those folks toward, hey, let's come to the table and sit down and collaborate. Again, therein lies a big part of our problem. You got a problem when you can't even sit down and talk about the fact that you got a problem. And that's pretty much where we are as a society, whether you talk about this issue or, Dems versus Republicans or whatever, we do too much back and forth shooting at each other and not enough sitting down and really, hey, disagree, yeah. But then try to find the things that we can agree on that we know we all need. Everybody knows we need more affordable housing. So how do we move in a direction to get that done? That does, like Robbie and Lynette and others have said, that doesn't involve killing our single family neighborhoods. So that, if I would leave you with one thing, that would be the thing. And, as a reporter with your pulse on media, you can on some way, hopefully, put a pin on that one, because we need more people that are trying to build consensus and collaboration and less of the wars back and forth. That's my 2 cents.
I think he can be the real voice to help us save our neighborhoods.
And Andrew, that's not meant to be, you're the activist reporter. I want to make that very clear, because I do write myself and I totally understand your job. What I think we're trying to tell you is that we've seen such poor coverage at the LA Times on these topics.
Slanted.
That we are, I think what we're saying is, we're hoping and praying that what we're saying to you kind of gets through enough that you do a little digging, that you'll try to understand the topic a little better, that you'll dig
I mean,
deep.
I think we do a very fair, good job, and willing to defend that to anyone. But please email me, and would love to chat about concerns people have about the coverage or anything like that. And if you have angles that you think we're not covering, would love to hear about it.
Hey, Andrew,
So,
do you think maybe Jim O'Sullivan, John brought up an interesting point. Do you think the Times, because I've been down there pitching things to the Times, do you think the editorial board might set up a meeting on that big long table and get both sides together?
I'm not on the editorial side. I'm not on the opinion side. I know.
But what do you think the LA Times might be interested in
I would
getting
email
both
them.
sides together, and then you can see what's actually happening?
I would email the editorial email. I mean, I honestly, I don't talk to them. I have no say what they do. And so
be
an
fair
on-site
to Andrew on this, guys, please. It's not his, this is not his area. Just all I'm saying is
I
be
cover
fair.
housing for the papers.
Right. He's very specific in his topics, so let's just give him that. And I think there's a bunch of us that can actually reach out to the editorial board if that's the direction we want to go.
Yep, and we've got all their emails, so we can definitely do that.
John, I wanted to ask Andrew a question, if that's appropriate.
Go ahead.
And Andrew, you've been preparing to write this article in the housing space. What are particularly the Black elected officials that represent this community saying that are different than what you heard tonight?
From I haven't jumped in and reported. I just started reporting on this, but from my understanding, it's basically about the same. Am I wrong about that?
Well, we're seeing that many of them have come out in support of, or have been shepherding Wiener around to neighborhoods and introducing him, and have basically not acknowledged the position on last year's legislation or this year's. And so we're curious as to what when you ask as a reporter what their public speak is, because we're trying to get them to state their position so that we can understand whether we're being represented or scapegoated.
I think I was kind of going back to last year, 11/20, rather than the specific 9. Yeah, I mean, if there's anyone in particular, I mean, just the elected official, obviously, but you feel that they haven't come out and taken a position. Is that correct?
I beyond feeling, I have not seen in writing and in print a position that represents the interests of this community, of the folks who've been on this call with you tonight, nor have they had any statements that well, with the exception of Senator Kamliger last year, where she firmly took a position opposing SB 1120, but that was last year. Now we're in a new legislative session and they've been quiet. And I think that was part of the energy of tonight's conversation on the politics in the community, that there's a recognition that some of our folks are not following the edict that they were elected to represent. They've assumed the office and now think they know.
And that's a problem, clearly. Mom, were you trying to say something a minute ago? We don't want to overlook the mothership connection here.
I was just saying that perhaps the Times crew that is writing the article should come and visit on site. Have someone arrange maybe a snapshot of tours so that you could see firsthand what it would look like to add houses and apartments and all of that in our beautiful residential areas.
Will you have me down there? I'd love to come.
So I think that many of the people who just spoke, I think, to see the lawns, the yards, the community, and to see what the bill would enable builders to do to our community. And also, we do know that the bills do not have any kind of stipulation for approval from the county and, normally those normal routes. And that is very concerning. If somebody like my neighbor, somebody can just come out and throw up a 6-unit building, and that's troubling, very troubling, because it's just not a congruent. We would like to have a congruent neighborhood
as it is now. We don't want to see people coming in, building these towers and all that and making it a concrete jungle. So we just really want, you know, I think it would be helpful for you or the staff or someone to come and take an on-site look so that you will see what we're talking about.
I think I heard Andrew nodding his head and giving his assent to that. You ready to do a neighborhood tour, Andrew?
Yeah. And I'm, you know, I'm familiar with the neighborhood and the makeup, but would love to have you show me around or any, you know, and show me more in depth about your concerns.
Yep, absolutely. If my mom tells me to do something, you know, I'm going to jump on it. Lynetta McElroy, and then we're going to wrap up after this. Lynetta's got her hand up. Go ahead, Lynetta.
Thank you so much. Once again, everyone that's on this call, there is an HCD. Does everyone know what the HCD is? The Housing Community Development. They're the ones who come up with the numbers as to how much housing is needed. They are using a methodology that inflates that number at least by 2 times. And so we have a unique opportunity to go to the listening session. The listening session is on May the 27th. I will send the information to John Heath. Also, there is a survey. Please do that survey. It is due by May the 10th. Now, when you look at what HCD is saying on that survey, please don't be dissuaded. Please speak your mind with clarity. And again, I will send that to John Heath. John, if you would be kind enough to send that out. That's very important. And that's something that we can do.
Sounds good. Well, guys, thank you all so much for taking the extra time and turning this into a marathon session. I think it was well worthwhile. Thanks again to our 2 remaining panelists, Jan Perry and Laura Velke. And Andrew, thank you for taking the time to have this group conversation as well. And we'll follow up. We'll stay on it.
Yeah, please email me, and thanks for answering my questions, and have a good night, everyone.
All right.
Thanks, everybody.
Take care,
Bye.
everybody.
Let's
Thanks,
go eat
John.
dinner.
Yep. Get